and then introduced. That's to avoid crosstalk between the committee members, and it provides for a smoother meeting and a more professional meeting. There may be differing views among committee members and among delegations and presenters, as well as committee members here this evening. So to ensure a comfort level for all, that we respect everyone in a very courteous manner, and that these are all written in our policy of the Vancouver School Board, and so would just like to reiterate that. This is the Planning and Facilities meeting has been meeting quite regularly every week now, every Wednesday, and just for clarification, tonight's meeting is a regular Planning and Facilities meeting. If you've noticed, last week and next week, those are focused on the long-range facilities plan. And for those that are focused on the long-range facilities plan, all stakeholder groups, we've invited 2 members from each stakeholder group, usually the member for the planning and facilities, as well as the president of their organization for those 2 meetings. Tonight's meeting is a regular committee 2 meeting, a planning and facilities meeting. So that's why there's 1 representative for each organization. We have, if you have an agenda item or if you've reviewed it prior to coming here this evening, that we have 13 delegations, and we usually go through the delegations first, and then staff presents their reports to the committee. This evening we're going to change that up first, as the staff reports are relatively short. So we're going to go through the staff reports first. So item number 2 first, prior to number 1, delegations. So we will go through there first. Then when we get to the portion with regards to the delegations, then I'll go over a brief introductions with regards to the delegation presentation at that time. So if we could begin with the delegations report, which is 2.1. It's listed as a long-range facilities plan update because the report, the facilities plan was presented before. There will be an update at next week's meeting, which is strictly a LRFP meeting. So this evening, there's not a report with regards to that long-range facilities plan. And then so we'll head straight into 2.2, which is an update or Edith Cavell Elementary Public Information Session held on January 30th, 2019. So if Manager of Planning, Jim Hoop, could present that report to the committee, much appreciated.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my pleasure to provide an information update on the meeting that was held on January 30th on the Edith Cavell Seismic Upgrade Project. This is one of the 10 or so boards that were provided at the information meeting, showing the site and the situation with respect to the current school. The main building, main classroom building, built around 1920, is H1, or a high seismic risk. There's an additional frame structure, also a high seismic risk, rated H1, and there's also the Small Talk Center, childcare preschool center, and an out-of-school care center on the site as well. So those are the structures on the facility itself, and the studied option is to do a seismic upgrade of the facilities. At that meeting, we garnered some results from the parents and other interested members of the community at the meeting, and also provided an online and paper feedback survey opportunity, which closed on February 14th. The vast majority of the represented people at the session or in the filling out the survey were parents of children attending the school, and also parents of children interested in attending the school. In terms of the information session itself, the majority, 66% or so either agreed or somewhat agreed that the information session was helpful, and there's more information contained in your hard copy of your reports on this. The survey and at the information session, we provided an open-ended comment section or open-ended comment opportunity. And this is a summary of the themes that we've categorized from that meeting. It certainly a large number of individuals would have hoped for a new school at the Edith Cavell Elementary site, but the least cost option funded by the Ministry of Education is to seismically upgrade. So, and it's not untypical to find that there's a split of parents that would like to see a new school, and it has many advantages. Other parents and students like the school that they're in and would prefer to see a seismic upgrade. So it's not untypical to see a split in that concern. Other comments noted at the meeting were the future increases to the residential density in the Cambie corridor in the area, and accommodating those. Concerns about building issues that could be found during the seismic upgrade, noting that if there are issues found, whether it's asbestos or whatever, those would be mitigated and fixed. So that the range of other comments are listed there. So it was certainly a success, and the next steps for the upgrade are that consultants have been retained to complete the design for the seismic upgrade. Once that design is complete, the project will be tendered for construction with a targeted completion in early 2022. That completes my information update, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jim, for your report. I'm just going to open it up for committee members with any questions, comments with regards to Edith Cavell, the public information session. Janet?
Just saying, I appreciate the community came out to give their feedback for us. That we have had a lot of interactions with the Cavell community, and we continue to do so to try and get the best possible solution for this seismic project.
Thank you, Jim. And just looking at here for further discussion with regards to the request for Edith Cavell Elementary, the expansion request portion. So that will be coming possibly, we're looking at April or May, hearing from the ministry with regards to that, right? We didn't receive anything yet.
Correct.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the report. Next item, 2.3, School Safety and Security Report. Mr. Schindel, Associate Superintendent, School Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm pleased to present the School Safety and Security Report to the Planning and Facilities Committee this evening. The report is presented with references to our strategic plan goals. Goals number 3, create a culture of care and shared social responsibility. And goal number 4, provide effective leadership and governance and stewardship. Just to provide a little context and background to the report, the board meeting, at a board meeting, motion was made in December 2018 that staff complete review current supervision and security protocols at all elementary schools and include such items as supervision aids, fencing and gates, identifying areas of vulnerability, as well as consider the effectiveness of cameras. The goal was to determine what additional steps can be taken in the short term, as well as consider any long-term changes that needed to be made. So the report encompasses our 89 elementary sites. It includes 11 annexes, 18 secondary schools, and 2 adult education centers. The purpose of the report is to provide a high-level summary of supervision in schools, safety and security protocols, security of facilities and grounds, the use of cameras, and other approaches to enhance safety and security. So in terms of safety and security protocols, with respect to supervision information, there's supervision in school guidelines. These guidelines come through the VSB School Startup Policies and Procedures Review. It is a resource for our administrators that outlines supervision responsibilities under the authority of the school principal. This includes the organization of supervision schedules for teachers and non-enrolling staff in accordance with contractual obligations. In terms of the safe arrival and student attendance procedures, these are covered in our Administrative Procedures 330, student attendance, which indicates that schools will have established and well-communicated procedures for recording and reporting student attendance. In elementary schools, they use district safe arrival protocols. These include attendance that is taken by the teacher, office staff inputting late excused absences, and the creation of a safe arrival call-out list. In secondary schools, attendance is taken by the teacher at the beginning of each period, and an accurate daily record of attendance is kept for each student. Teachers enter these student attendances as attendance directly into the student information system. And finally, looking at supervision aides, these are allocated to elementary school sites based on enrollment, site location, and site complexity. They're reviewed annually in the spring by employees services and school services. Principals of elementary schools are responsible for meeting with supervision aides to discuss safety rules, expectations, procedures, and site boundary areas for students inside the school and on the school grounds on an ongoing basis. In terms of student safety, school safety resources that are used by our school-based administrators include the Safe and Orderly Schools checklist and the Health and Safety to-do list. These include such items as establishing a critical incident response team, a violent threat risk assessment team, a site-based health and safety committee, reviewing protocols for child abuse prevention and response, reviewing guidelines for intervening with potentially suicidal students, and reviewing district and school-specific emergency procedures. In elementary schools, teachers discuss stranger danger procedures with their classes throughout the year, and it is widely acknowledged that in our district, we have the strongest district police partnership in BC. VPD school liaison officers are embedded in all of our secondary schools, with each SLO providing service to a family of elementary schools as well. Looking to the section of the report on security protocols, these 4 areas were considered. Office sign-in procedures. So sign-in and sign-out procedures are established at each of the elementary and secondary school sites. There's separate sign-in procedures that exist for site staff, on-call teachers, employees, and continuing volunteers. There's also a visitor registry known as the Red Book that's used for our itinerant staff and visitors to the site. We have guidelines for the supervision of volunteers, in particular, that provide school procedures for the orientation of volunteers, entry into school, monitoring and appraisal, a volunteer conduct agreement, and guidelines for interacting with students and volunteer coaching requirements. District identification badges are issued with picture ID at time of hire, and it is recommended that these be worn by staff in a school. School staff do not typically wear identification badges. However, district staff visiting school sites, such as maintenance and itinerant staff, are expected to wear these identification badges when on site. There's also the practice for visitors and volunteers to sign in at the school office, where they can be issued a VSB visitor's identification tag. In terms of adults interacting with students, under the guidelines, an adult is any person working, volunteering, or otherwise interacting with students on school grounds or at school activities. The guidelines outline a common set of behavior expectations for adults interacting with students. These are covered in Administrative Procedures 490, volunteers in district schools, and they also include comprehensive guidelines for supervision of volunteers. In terms of safety alerts, the district does have a safety alert system to record and share descriptive information with other schools about a situation that is potentially dangerous to students, staff, and school community. Upon receipt of the safety alert from a school, district staff review that information to safety alert and arrange for the timely distribution to the wider school community and follow up as appropriate. Looking to facilities, And the 4 items in the report listed in these areas: security check and locked doors. These times for locking and unlocking the school building and setting the alarms are set by the building engineer, head custodian, and/or the operations department in consultation with the school principal. In 2013, there was a school security audit of locked and unlocked doors that occurred. This audit reviewed the locking of interior doors, exterior doors, and access needs of emergency vehicles, in particular the Vancouver Fire Department and the Vancouver Police Department were considered. Looking to fencing and gates, most elementary and secondary school sites have some fencing, lockable gates, and access and entry points on site. There are various sizes of fencing at each of the schools as documented on site maps. These range in size from 4 feet tall, which are usually around the school perimeter, and parking lots to 12 feet tall chain link fences that are usually surround tennis courts or are on busy streets. There are lockable gates on site that are large enough for vehicles and machinery to move in and out of the school site when maintaining school grounds or in the event of an emergency. Chain link fences usually have limited access points for the school and neighborhood community to pass through. And as school sites are open, welcoming, and safe places, there has not been a strategy to fence off areas of schools or school grounds. In terms of school grounds and sight lines, the district does utilize crime prevention through environmental design principles in designing and maintaining school grounds. Sight lines are part of the daily routines of the ground maintenance department. The majority of schools that border wooded areas are separated from the woods by fences that range from 4 feet to 6 feet in height. And some examples of these include schools like Queen Mary, Southlands, Queen Elizabeth Annex, and Norma Rose Point. Looking to security cameras, cameras have been used on a temporary basis and on occasion in the district schools at the request of the Vancouver Police Department. Permanent surveillance via security cameras does not occur in the school district sites due to a number of privacy issues. The Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner has released guidelines on this particular topic and has indicated that it should only be used when other less privacy invasive methods have proven ineffective. So in terms of follow-up of this report, the 3 areas that district staff are looking at to review the safety alert process to ensure appropriate and timely information is being provided to school communities, reminding all schools to have signage and systems in place requiring visitors to report to and sign in at the main office. And finally, reinforce the district's expectation that VSP staff wear identification badges at school sites. So this concludes the presentation on this report, and I welcome any questions or comments at this time. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Associate Superintendent, School Services. And thank you for the detailed report, even though you said it's a high level, and a number of these items and subsections have come to the board before in a report in its own. So it's good to have this at a high level to connect it all together. So we appreciate that. This report was requested by the board from the December 2018 meeting. So I appreciate gathering this together. I'll open it up for questions, comments from trustees and members of the committee. Oliver?
Yes, thank you very much for your report. My question revolves around the supervision aides. What sort of training or updates or kind of techniques are supervision aides taught before they're out looking after our children on the school grounds?
Through the chair, at time of hire, there is some orientation that is done with the supervision aides. And then really the orientation at the school level is done through the school principal. Employee Services is looking at providing some additional training to supervision aides, and that's certainly something that was discussed, and we're looking at exploring that further.
Follow-up, Oliver?
Yes, thank you. I was wondering if that is something that you could put in your follow-up recommendations of this report as another point in addition to the 3 that you have up there.
Certainly through the chair, I'll take that information back to Associate Superintendent of Employee Services, and we can have that discussion and follow up.
Thank you. Janet?
Thank you, Alan. One of the questions that was raised by the Sexsmith PAC was whether they could have security cameras at the school. And I think at the time they referenced that other districts do have them in place. So maybe I could request that the committee also supports a follow-up item to get a little more detail on the privacy issues that have been identified and whether there are security cameras in other schools. And I'm not necessarily saying that we should have them in Vancouver, but I think it would be good for trustees to have some more information, some more detailed information on that.
Thank you. We'll take that. I remember in the past there was a report with regards to Killarney at a point, so maybe that information could be pulled as well from the past. Estrelita?
Yes, thank you through the chair. On 4.2 on fencing and gates, just a question. It says most elementary and secondary schools have some fencing. I'm just wondering, is there a policy specifically relating to fencing of playground areas? And if so, do we have sort of firmer numbers on that? Thank you.
Jim?
Through the chair, we do not have a policy on fencing with respect to different areas of a school ground. We typically put up fencing to avoid conflicts between streets and active play on our school grounds. So where we know that there is active play and kids are playing with a ball or such, we ensure that there isn't an incident where children are going across the street inadvertently. But no, there is no policy specific to fencing.
Thank you. Just closing the discussion with regards to the school safety and security report. At the last personnel meeting, there was a connecting type of discussion that there was a reference to the title of it, an emergency flip chart. And I think, is it possible for the trustees to maybe have that in the future? That might be helpful for the last meeting and as well this meeting, that we were shown parts of it, and it's good for the trustees to have that. All right. Thank you. Oh, Jennifer?
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks so much for the report. I'm just wondering if this review or if our safety alert procedures and processes include something around the support offered to students after safety breaches have occurred, either through witnessing a safety breach or directly experiencing.
So through the chair, our safety alerts typically are one of the contact points is through our district principal of student support services, and she has responsibility for connecting with elementary counselors in the school. So typically, if there are particular students that are involved with an incident, she would ensure that there's follow-up with the counselor, and in addition, the principal at the school site that are involved in that situation.
That's it. Very good. Thank you. Lois.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize for running late this evening. I just have a follow-up question, jumping on the back of Trustee Reddy's question there. I'm wondering if these sources are made known to, or how these resources are made known to the students in the communities. Whether they I just through, I guess, personal anecdotal stories, I know of some families who are not aware of these resources are available, and they were kind of wondering how they could get support, and so I'm wondering how these are communicated to the community. Thank you.
So just a clarification of the question, resources meaning counseling support for the students, yeah. So I think certainly through the chair, families typically would receive communication either through the school-based administrator or through a referral process through teachers at the school level to the administrator, and then the administrator would contact the family to make them know what the resources are that can support their child.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. No other questions? No. Thank you, Rob. The final reporting item is the VSB Legacy Carving Project, Reconciliation and Education underway at the Vancouver Board of Education office, which is right in front. Chaz, could you share with us the project that's occurring in the front as well as a number of the other locations?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chaz Desjardins. I'm the District Vice Principal of Indigenous Education. I'm a Nihil Métis on my father's side, Robert Edmond Desjardins, and I'm French, English, and Spanish on my mother's side, Diane Lorraine Johnson. I'm also a member of the Cold Lake First Nations and a Treaty 6 First Nation. So thank you for being here and listening about this exciting project that has began last year in March with the vision of a colleague of mine, Davida Marsden, who received a vision about this project a number of years ago and sat on it until the time was right, and came to me in conversation and asked me whether I'd want to unite in this project. And so it has always been a dream of mine to do a project such as this size. And it's called the VSB Legacy Carving Project, the dream, vision, and reality united, and we're now in the reality phase. If you've been out into the front grounds of the VSB, you can't miss but see a cedar log, which is 44 feet in length. And we do have some 2 welcome figures being carved. So the theme of this project is reconciliation and education, and reconciliation with the TRC mandate and the 94 calls to action. We take this work very seriously, and how this project has been envisioned has really been a collaborative process. It started in March of this past year, and in discussions with senior management, I brought this idea to them with the guidance of my colleague and the help of Jody Langlois, our assistant, our associate superintendent. It is now in the reality phase. So we have a number of local carvers from the local nations carving 3 major pieces. And as you can see here, this is the reconciliation pole that is being carved on the grounds of the VSB. The lead carver is named James Harry, and he's working under the guidance of working alongside his father, Will Acton, and they're both from the Squamish Nation. Basically, we see this project as a wonderful opportunity to really bring Indigenous ways of knowing and being in regards to education across our district. And it's a wonderful opportunity to develop curriculum. It showcases and allows our students to come visit the carvers on site, and really speaks to experiential learning. And however you want to see it, land-based learning, they have an opportunity to come and meet the carvers, speak to them face-to-face, and talk about what this whole process is about. For myself, as the district vice principal, I have a vision of what reconciliation in education means, and but the carvers themselves have their own vision. And so when we brought this project, it went out to public RFP process, and we had a number of submissions, and as a group, we decided the carvers that we chose would do really good work. And so you can see here, there is a picture of James Harry. He's an up-and-coming young carver of the Squamish Nation. His father is internationally well-known globally, has a number of works around the world. And that reconciliation pole really speaks to where we are in our reconciliation walk in regards to education. And how I envision it for myself is that it is considered medicine, and it's going to give back to the children yet to come for the next 150 years. These poles will be erected on the grounds of the VSB, and it's about beginning to make visible the history of the local nations, honoring Musqueam territory. We have Musqueam carvers from Musqueam, a young woman by the name of Crystal Sparrow, who is going to be carving the female welcome figure, and as well as we have William Dan, who is from the Musqueam Nation, although he's not Musqueam himself. He comes from the island, but he has been adopted into the Musqueam community, lives there, and he will be carving the male figure. So you will have two major welcome figures, which is symbolic in Coast Salish territory, to welcome everyone to the VSB head office here. And when they're raised up and unveiled, their hands will be raised to everyone. And we have a gender balance. We have both a male and a female figure, which I felt it was very important to have a balance of genders, because in other school districts, we often just see one welcome figure. So Vancouver will have two, along with the reconciliation pole. And as you can see in the process here, there's a miniature there. There will be a number of figures carved into the reconciliation pole, and each one of those has a story attached to it and a history. It's not for me to tell you what the story is. I'm learning from the carvers what the stories are, and those stories go back time immemorial, hundreds and thousands, or they go back thousands of years. But I have a good understanding of what they mean, and we collaborated as a group to really envision how did we envision reconciliation in education, and how do we want to share this with our young people in our district. I can just basically tell you some of the figures on the reconciliation pole. At the top, there will be a Thunderbird holding the world, and that world is our children. Beneath that, you will have frog, and frog represents transformation. And at the bottom of the pole, you'll have bear, and bear has many meanings. And with that, at the very bottom of the pole, you'll have a female who is caring for the young people. And basically want to share with the kids, education is about transformation, and our district is going through transformation as we speak. And our kids are going through transformation because we now have, with the new revised curriculum, the inclusion of Indigenous knowledges, First Peoples principles of learning across the district. So this is not only, this is more than a symbolic gesture. It's going to be a presence for a very long time, and our children will be able to receive those stories, and everybody will be greeted in a good way. So we look forward to having everyone come on June 21st of this year to see the pieces unveiled, and to really honor and acknowledge the journey that we're all on. And they will be raised up the day before, and on National Indigenous Day, they'll be unveiled in a ceremony, and we will be inviting anybody who wants to come to be witness. So our students are currently witnessing the process as we speak. The classes are signing up to do 1-hour visits, and that work has, the students visiting has already started. So we look forward to just having everybody be able to come in and experience the whole process. It's open for everybody, and I think it's created quite a buzz. I know going out daily, I go out and meet with the artists and speak to them, and I'm able to, actually touch the pole. And for me, it is medicine. Cedar is medicine and the Coast Salish culture, and this will be medicine and reciprocity of giving back to our students far beyond our time and our children's time and their children. So that is the project, and it started in earnest in the end of January when we had the 3 logs delivered. 2 are at the Britannia carving shed, Squalwyn at Britannia Secondary. And we have the main log here. The biggest log here is on the site, on the grounds of the VSB. And the other 2 are 17 feet and 20 feet. And 1 is going to be transported to the Musqueam territory next week, where William Dan will be carving it in the carving shed, and Crystal Sparrow will be continuing to carve at the Squalwyn carving shed located at the Britannia on site near Britannia Community Center. So I think it's just a beautiful way to bring people together, and our whole theme is we're all pulling together for our children, and that is why I love the work that I do, to be able to provide them with this opportunity. My children going through myself, I didn't get an opportunity to do this, so this is makes me even more happier. So I hope I bring good news.
Thank you, Chaz. Definitely good news and important news to see that. And I do reiterate what you say, that although I haven't spoken to James, I've spoken to Rick, father, Acton, is that correct? And he is very, very open to share the poll and the meaning of the world and truth and reconciliation. And I've seen, and like you, when I come to the board, I usually spend about a half an hour watching, and even if no one's there, I like to take a look at how it's progressing. And when I'm there with Rick and James, they are, more so Rick, sharing and describing the poll, and the community members do really appreciate it. So it's a very important project for our district. And thank you for Chaz for organizing that, and looking forward for June 21st. Open up for questions or comments for Chaz with regards to the reconciliation poll. That's Lita.
Thank you, through the chair. I want to commend you on this project. I think this is an outstanding idea and project for the district. Really, really excited to see it come about. I'm wondering, are we documenting it in a sort of, yeah, great, because I think it could make a really great video when it's all done for all the kids. So well done.
We are documenting. I go out daily and take tons of pictures, and I know other people are taking pictures, and hopefully towards the end of the process we can bring all those pictures together and create some sort of time lapse. I'd like to, especially when it's being raised up, do a time lapse of that and be able to share that back with our students. We do have one of our Indigenous education workers who is a filmmaker, and she's going to be engaging in the process of having some of her students come and speak to the artist to have those conversations about sharing the history and talking about what does reconciliation and education mean to themselves. We also do have a mini art project that we're going to share out in the district very soon. There's lots of shavings that you'll see. The whole process of debarking the tree, and then the shavings we are going to use to create some art pieces, and then we plan to bring our canoe that was carved a number of years ago to the board and have it placed in the lobby of the board as the metaphor of the journey together, pulling together. And then with that, I'm hoping to display the art pieces that the students will do. We had our knowledge keeper, Amanda White, create an exemplary piece that I'm going to share out in the district once I get it all drafted and put together, to share out with not just the art teachers, but across, you know, the curriculum, with any teacher that wants to talk about reconciliation in education. What does that mean to each student? Because everybody has their own understanding what that means, and then create a feather, and on that feather they're going to write, you know, what does it mean to them, and then we're going to display it in the lobby at some point, probably in April or May, but we'll bring the canoe first. So we do have those things in place, and we've had interest from local people in the surrounding neighborhoods about offering to do some sort of video projects and videotaping. Yeah, so there's going to be an archive of the history to be shared beyond, you know, the next 5 months.
Perfect. Thank you once again, Chaz. All right, that covers off the reports from staff. And now we're moving into going back to the first agenda item with regards to delegations. So first, I'd like to thank all the delegations. There's 13 delegations this evening. And I'd like to thank all the delegations for taking the time to present to the committee. And these are very important parts to the trustees and to the committee members to help us formulate any decisions, any discussions in the future. The 13 delegations that are presenting here this evening, these items will be coming back or are ongoing. For example, with regards to the Henry Hudson Strathcona French Immersion, the report hasn't come back to the committee yet. That will be coming probably next month in April, but we appreciate hearing information. Delegations wanted to present earlier than when the report comes out, and we're fine with that, and we appreciate coming out this evening to present to the committee the reports from all three delegations. As well, the long-range facilities plan, the delegation, that is ongoing. We actually just began that just a couple of weeks ago. So any information we have from delegations with regards to the long-range facilities plan helps us along the way, and the trustees are open for all input from committee members. And so whether it's now or later on, all that is very helpful for future deliberations by the trustees. So I can't thank the delegations enough for taking the time out to prepare and to present to the committee. There is, and I would like, if I was alone by myself or trustees at workshops, I would like to have as long as possible to listen to every delegation. But given that we are a committee and we're meeting here, I think it's fair to have, and it's written in our policy, that it is a delegation of a 10-minute time period. And the recorder will be keeping, in the room there, hi Carrie, keeping track of the time. At a 9-minute mark, there will be a reminder that there's 1 minute left. And at 10 minutes, to be fair for all committee members, that I like to get them home in time before the snow falls or the ice starts forming on the ground. So I think it's fair that we keep it concise. After the presentation by each delegation, then I'll ask the delegation to remain for a moment, and I'll ask all committee members if they have any questions with regards to the report they want clarification on. It's not a time for a dialogue between delegations and committee, but it's questions of clarification. To be fair and respectful for all delegations, and delegations will be presenting things differently possibly, that I would ask everyone, those who are in attendance this evening, and this is what I usually ask of all meetings, is if you could be respectful. And I know there's a want to clap or cheer at times, but if I can ask for that to be held off right till the very, very end of the meeting. So it's respectful for all delegations, and I'd like to have, whether it's the delegations or committee members, that to have them in a safe and comfortable environment to speak freely. Okay. All right, so we will start the delegations. First delegation is from Henry Hudson Pack, and if I can ask Jay Patterson, and he'll be presenting on French Immersion program at Henry Hudson Elementary. Josh. Yes. J initial. And okay. For our recorder, if you could, everyone who will be presenting with you, if we could have their names for the recorder so the trustees would know and the committee members would know.
Thank you. I'm joined, my name is Josh Patterson. I'm joined by Melissa Clements and Jennifer Tibbetts, who are also parents in the Hudson Pack. And there are lots more Hudson families in the room tonight, and we're so thankful to all the members of our community for joining us. You should all have a copy of our written brief and the request contained in it. I will say at the outset that we absolutely oppose this proposal in its gradual form under option 2 and its immediate form under option 3. This proposal seems to have been approached from our perspective as a pure numbers exercise. We're not opposed to consideration of how best to deploy district resources, but what's lost in this is the impact on students, families, and communities. Families at Hudson Elementary do not want our school community to be divided. We want our community to remain whole. Our PAC conducted a survey, and we got a very high response rate. As you can see here, 82% of us listed wanting to remain in the community at Hudson as the first reason to oppose the most disruptive version of this proposal. Our kids together, English and French stream, have built a community that they love. We have been fortunate in that our school community is not a divided one. Children play together. They build friendships across streams and across grades. We know, and the VSB knows, how important community is to mental health in children and to learning. And now we're being told that if we want to have our kids continue to be a part of this community, we face the risk of having the district's offer of French immersion stripped from our kids under option 3. Because under option 3, district staff have acknowledged to us they don't in fact expect most of us to move. And our survey actually confirms that. 73% of parents say that they intend to keep their kids at Hudson in English if French immersion is moved to Strathcona due to community, childcare, and transportation reasons. So what is actually being contemplated in option 3 is to tear French from kids who you have already enrolled. Hugely disruptive to learning and senseless, given that it will not help to alleviate any capacity issue at Hudson now or really in the future, because most will stay. This may be framed by some people as a choice. Oh, well, you know, if you want French, move to Strathcona. Try and enroll up the hill at some other school, assuming there's even room. So then, in order to keep French immersion, what we're being asked is tear up your community, have your friendships torn up, uproot to other schools. For most of us, going further afield is not a realistic choice due to where we live, work, childcare arrangements, and stability for our children. So in option 3, what we're really left with is the alternative of having French immersion taken from our kids midstream. It is simply not fair or reasonable to ask us to make that choice. When the district says, you've got a spot at this kindergarten in French immersion, families build their lives and their expectations around the stability of that promise. And that's what we've done. And now we hear that maybe that promise is to be ripped from our children. In our view, without any compelling justification. We wouldn't accept that for any kids in the district. We don't accept it for ours. I want to make another quick point as well. A slight majority of kids in Hudson French Immersion are from the downtown peninsula. And we keep hearing from VSB staff that downtowners are just people who have opted into a district choice program. And we have no enhanced interest in any particular school. I heard it repeated last night at the consultation. This year's kindergarten intake is the very first one to take place during the temporary suspension of French immersion catchments to deal with uneven demands across the city. Every kid in French immersion at Hudson from grade 1 up was admitted to the school, from the downtown area, was admitted to the school when Hudson was their catchment school. And I think that trustees need to keep that in mind. Whether we live in Kitsilano or downtown, Hudson is our school. Now, I attended the information session yesterday in Hudson's gym. I know that some trustees did as well. The information coming from the district thus far to parents and to the board, in our view, has been seriously problematic. We know a report is forthcoming, but the district has provided very little information as to what the actual consequences of the different options are for our kids, for teachers, and for schools. There's a chart, it says there'll be impacts, but very little information is provided. When we ask what these options will mean in terms of kids learning, we're told, well, we don't know. We're having a consultation. We expect to find out. When we ask what the consequences will be for our neighbors at Strathcona, we're told, we don't know. Nothing is for certain. Our fellow parents at Strathcona certainly have a strong view. We support and we understand their concerns. But going to our consultation last night, you wouldn't have known that. Parents just walking in would have had no idea of some of the really problematic effects this proposal will have for our neighbors. If our kids are moved, what space will they be in? Will it be seismically fit? We don't know. What would it mean for kids to have French immersion stripped from them midstream? What support would be provided for that? We don't know. If French immersion is tapered out under option 2, what impact will there be to that? How will we maintain quality as the kids continue to go through that shrinking program? We don't know. We've been provided, and you've been provided, with terribly inadequate information. As I've already said, most kids would wind up staying at the school under option 3. We note, by the way, that the district staff have said that there is no pedagogical benefit to the double cohorting, that it's really a resourcing issue. And we get it, resources are important. But to us, a potentially marginal benefit in terms of resourcing teachers or librarians is not really a compelling reason to disrupt the education that's in progress of people who are already in their programs. The net result of option 3 would be less students in French immersion in the district. It would mean less French immersion teachers, as we understand that some number of them will remain at Hudson. It will be that students just lose their French instruction and are dropped into the English program with all of the problems that will entail without any benefit for English enrollment at Hudson. We don't think it makes sense. If I can take you to slide 4, this proposal ignores the implications on before and after school childcare spaces for Hudson students. It doesn't even seem to address the question, as if it's not significant to parents and how we will have to make our decisions. As we understand, there's a 200-person waiting list that's been capped at Strathcona after school care. There just won't be any room. 60 of our children are currently in Hudson out of school care. 40 have local parents pick up their kid or have relatives do it. And 64% of us have said that we will have to make new childcare arrangements, and we don't really understand what the implications will be. In terms of transportation, 100% of the French immersion families surveyed at Hudson have said that Hudson is more convenient for their families and their children. 89% of us surveyed said that Hudson, is more convenient because we can commute by foot, by bike, or by transit easily. Pardon me. What you actually see here is that the average commuting time for parents going from currently going from Hudson to Strathcona would be about 31 minutes, where the average commuting time right now is 9.84. It's a significant difference. And don't assume as well that the children in the downtown area are necessarily going to have it a lot better. Many of the students who are in the West End are going to wind up with a longer commute as well. So there are a whole host of problems that are associated with this proposal. And from our perspective, this was sort of dropped in on us while our PAC has actually been advocating with the province and with the district to try and actually make sure that Hudson is rebuilt to the right size. You know, at the end of the day, moving the French immersion program to Strathcona or to anywhere else in that for that matter is not going to alleviate the capacity issues at Henry Hudson. The relocation would disrupt our children, our families, and our community, and would result in fewer French immersion spots being offered in the district. We think you've got the order wrong here. We at the Hudson PAC think that until a decision is made on the size of Hudson School and how that shakes out, this is just premature to be having this conversation. And so we urge the board to take the opportunity to put an end to this tough situation of getting school sizes wrong that we see over and over and over again. We know that the province has got a role in that. And we've spoken to the province. We've been told by cabinet ministers and MLAs alike who've spoken to the education minister and who have said, we would entertain a request if one were forthcoming. I think that the board, and we think that the board should find out if that is true. There have been so many missed opportunities. I don't know if that's a beep for me or for who. Okay, well, I'll wrap up then if I may. There have been so many missed opportunities in our family of schools where schools haven't been built out to the right size. This is the last one. And this school could provide enough capacity for English enrollees as well as for French immersion and take the pressure off of the high utilization that exists in the Kitsilano in the downtown area. I thank you for your time today, and I say to you that we know it's your responsibility to make long-term, long-range decisions for everyone, but we also think that it's your responsibility to keep promises to families and not to disrupt those promises unless a very high standard of justification has been reached. That standard hasn't been reached here. It's reasonable and fair for Hudson families to expect that our community will not be broken up. And we ask you, therefore, to reject the proposals for change that are being laid before you and to get on with the real work of making sure that our school is built to the right size. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh. Not really. There was a part where towards the end you were saying this is the last one as Hudson, so I'm not sure if I sort of tweaked my ears a little, but that's all right. Had to do with right sizing. My question, and before I open up for everyone else, is the ask number 2. I'm not sure if that was a rhetorical ask or was there something very specific with regards to the phasing, if that's one of the options that the board goes for the fullest extent possible during the phase out period support. Was there suggestions of what sort of supports, or was that a rhetorical question for the board to address? Was there a discussion on that?
Well, that ask relates to in the event that you were to choose option number 2. Now, to be clear, we don't support option number 2. Right. But in the event you were to choose option number 2, we currently have, we're being asked in consultations, what do you think about these options? No one has told us what will it actually mean for the remaining kids as their education goes on in a diminishing French immersion program. What supports may be, or guarantees may be made later on to make sure that through teacher attrition or whatever else, that program doesn't just sort of vanish from the earth on its own after you've decided to phase it out. So that's really what that question is being geared at. How can we make sure to ensure, if you choose option 2, to ensure the integrity of the French immersion education at Hudson during the remainder of the phase-out period? And again, we have no information. So if I'm asked, well, what do you think about option 2? How can I actually answer?
Fair enough. For committee members, questions for the delegation? Oliver.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Thank you to the Hudson PAC and everyone for coming tonight on this issue. My question related to a comment you made with respect to the teachers. I was just wondering if you've had any informal or formal discussions with the French immersion teachers and whether or not you have a sense that some or all may move to Strathcona. I'm not looking for you to obviously disclose any confidential or personal information, but just kind of a sense for the board to understand, you know, if we're talking about most of them staying, some of them staying, all of them, or what the case might be.
We've had informal conversations with multiple teachers, and we understand that a significant number of them are like where they are, and under their contract they have the right to remain. They are, as I understand, hired first to the school and not actually attached to the district program. I could be mistaken about that. I'm not, you know, one of your labor negotiators. But we have strong reason to understand that a lot of those teachers would then be lost to French immersion in the district if they remain in what would become an English school. And that would be quite a shame. When we addressed that with district staff, we were told, well, you know, we could hire some more fresh ones from UBC. I understood that hiring French teachers was actually a bit of a problem. Sure, I mean, good luck. That would be great. But you have got some really experienced French immersion teachers there that it would be a great shame to lose. And particularly in your option 3, just an absurdity to have the same kids sitting in the same class with a French immersion teacher who has to switch into teaching them English. I mean, for what? It makes no sense.
Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Thank you so much for your presentation and also for the survey that you've conducted. I was wondering too, like you mentioned a little bit about the consultation process. Could you share a little bit about what you would have liked to see?
My colleague, Melissa here, her voice is actually gone, so I'm going to try, she has an answer, I'm going to try to voice it for her. Well, first of all, we know that you hear lots of complaints about consultation, and we don't reasonably expect perfection. What would be ideal, though, is, you know, to start this off, you know, hearing about it in a tweet from a reporter on a Friday evening. You know, we're just sitting at home or wherever we were, all of our families, and all of a sudden texting each other, holy smokes, have you seen this? I mean, so right away, wrong-footed with that. We got a letter from the VSB, came then on the heels of that very quickly with not much notice before there was to be a committee meeting discussing it. And then in the consultation last evening, there were all of these slides which were the same information that we've seen in the reports. And as I mentioned, I mean, nary a hint of any of the negative implications. I mean, I have read, and a lot on us on the PAC, and we've tried to circulate the materials, for example, from Strathcona. Those are very compelling reasons, never mind our own reasons. Not a word of it, not a scintilla. So if you were a Hudson parent who came out because of interest, but maybe wasn't as plugged in, you would have no idea about the negative implications to our neighboring schools, or really what was planned in respect of any of the options that are being proposed. So it's both the method of consultation and then just the substance. I mean, how can we be expected to offer you our input when we don't actually know what's actually being contemplated? And we also have no information about what other options were considered. I mean, this Hudson-Strathcona switcheroo just appeared on paper all of a sudden. We never, as far as we know, we were never consulted. Strathcona were never consulted. Other area schools, was there consideration given to the new downtown schools that are being built at some point in the future to alleviate this problem? Like, we just have no idea.
Jennifer? Okay, very good. All right. Anne, and then Janet.
Thank you. Through the chair. I'm just curious because right then you mentioned you weren't aware of other options, whether other schools may have been considered, although, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I also heard you say that you didn't want to see the program moved anyways, even if it is offered somewhere else. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what do your families see, or can you come up with any options as a short-term solution, given that it would still be years away before Hudson or even any of the new schools are built? There is an overcapacity issue. Have you guys discussed as a group if there's anything that you can see to help with the possible change if it's not moving the French immersion, but kids may still not get into your school? Have you looked at other options?
The option that we've been working on for 2 years is to try and get ahead of, we had hoped, some of the problems we were seeing at some of our neighboring schools in the city, and to make sure that seismic was being done right. I mean, to be honest, that's the option we've been focused on. And keep in mind, we're a group of volunteers. We're not professional planners. You know, believe me, I spent most of my day and part of another day this week working on this stuff. So, and that's what we were merrily going along trying to focus on as an alternative to a thing we didn't even know was coming. Now this is being dropped in. A moment's indulgence. Yeah, and we're in the PDR phase. We knew the rebuild wasn't that far off, and so it seemed like a ripe time to be having those conversations. And so that's what we've been trying. We've been meeting with MLAs and trustees going back for a while on that.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. If you could indulge me with a comment rather than a question of the presenters. We do have the letter from David Eby, the local MLA, who has been advised that the Minister of Education is prepared to receive submissions for the Vancouver School Board in this regard. And we have, heard from the parents about the idea of increased size of the school. So it is in process that we are trying to set up, I'm trying to set up a meeting with the Minister of Education. This would be one of the issues that would be brought forward to him.
We appreciate that, Chair. To you, Chair, through this chair, or however that's supposed to work.
As long as it gets done. Thank you. All right, seeing no more follow-up questions, thank you, the delegation. Thank you,
I'd like
Josh.
to thank you all and thank Melissa, who, when my computer died halfway through my presentation and I stalled for time, she was able to find the presentation on my phone and hand it to me. So thank you for that.
We didn't even know the transition. All right. Second delegation is Lord Strathcona Elementary, and the chair of Strathcona, Alex Smecker, Krista Sigurdsson, and Andrea Glickman. All three are correct? Or we have one more?
Okay, great.
If we have one more, if I can have the name.
Hi, good evening. Our additional member of the delegation is Katie Schindler.
Katie Schindler, thank you. Okay, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrea Glickman, and I'm here with my colleagues on behalf of the Strathcona Parent Advisory Council Board. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and I'd like to thank them for the privilege of carrying out our business on their lands. Given that we're speaking to the Vancouver School Board, I'm going to take a moment to reflect on the significance of this territorial acknowledgement, because education was one of the tools that the Government of Canada employed forcefully through legislation and policy to sever the continuation of Indigenous culture and to keep Indigenous people separate from the rest of Canadians. And so the school board and all school boards in Canada have an extra obligation to work in unity. It is with great credit to the resilience, wisdom, and generosity of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh that I am allowed to stand before you today to discuss our current education system, which did flow from that original racist system. We're here to speak from a place of unity where we seek the absolute best learning environment for every single student in the city. We do not believe that the EFI consolidation proposal will achieve that goal. Strathcona Elementary is a Tier 1 inner-city school at the intersection of Chinatown, Hogan's Alley, the downtown east side, and Strathcona, and has an extremely diverse student population. In a letter dated January 23rd from Adrian Keogh, he stated that the Vancouver School District is considering consolidating the EFI program at Henry Hudson with Strathcona to address the space and enrollment challenges at Hudson Elementary. The Strathcona Elementary PAC Board, I'll say at the outset, does not support the VS proposal in any of the options provided. The VSB proposal lacks sufficient detail to allow parents to make an informed decision, has an impossibly short timeline to allow for real parent engagement, and for the VSB to consider and incorporate parent feedback. We've identified serious concerns regarding resources and equity in the current proposal that would need to be fully addressed if any new proposal is to be brought forward in the future, and I reiterate that we oppose the current proposal. The proposal was prepared from a numbers perspective, and we share this. I heard Josh Patterson speaking on behalf of the Hudson PAC a few minutes ago and also identified this as an issue. The proposal appears to be prepared from a numbers perspective rather than taking into consideration the actual student and family needs and physical space at Strathcona, which we feel is a fundamentally inefficient and flawed manner of addressing the education system. We've identified serious equity issues at the school that would be exacerbated by the proposal. This is a unique situation for Strathcona Elementary, probably. The French program tends to have students from families with more resources and significantly less racial diversity than the English program. The French and the English programs are treated differently, and the students have different opportunities. We're currently addressing that internally at Strathcona. But there's a lot of tension there right now, and it's been there for a few years. And we're concerned that the increase in the EFI spaces will increase the inequity and the divide between the English and the French programs. At some schools with French and English programs, you do have a division between the students. At Strathcona, because of the location of it and the socioeconomic diversity and racial diversity of the population, the French-English divide has a socioeconomic and racial component to it that has to be considered in any kind of analysis of long-term planning. We have a number of concerns. We think that the current proposal devalues existing programs by not taking into account spaces that are currently used for music, for First Nation support rooms, and for family support rooms. We're concerned this is going to further disadvantage First Nations and low-income students who may not have access to counseling outside of the school. We're concerned that 154 more students will drastically impact the physical space of the school and the student experience. The school grounds and the playground and the cafeteria and the auditorium are already insufficient for the existing student population, and they will be grossly inadequate for a school that is another full third bigger. And we'll note that Strathcona has been the beneficiary of a seismic upgrade, and the current school is beautiful, and we're very grateful to have that. Our population actually went down with the seismic upgrade, which again is probably not ideal. And I'm also going to note that the 2019 long-range facilities plan from the school board, which you're considering, I believe, shows that Strathcona is at an operating capacity of 101% with 476 students right now. What we think happened is that there was some sort of a desire to look for somewhere to put the students that are at Henry Hudson right now, and all of a sudden these new numbers showed up for Strathcona having space, whereas previously it was identified by the VSB that Strathcona was at full capacity. The quote-unquote available space is in Building E at Strathcona. It's not seismically upgraded, and it has a seismic risk rating of high 3. It's not currently used for classroom space, and it was not considered available until recently with this proposal. It's unacceptable for our school to have gone through seismic upgrading, which was years of disruption to the students, to the community, only to move back into buildings that are deemed unsafe during an earthquake. We want to really point out that the available space in Building E, and I've got quotation marks around available space, is currently used for Strathcona's very excellent out-of-school care program. And if the full 154 spaces are added, then the OSC program is going to be directly impacted. In fact, we've been told that there will likely be a reduction of 60 spots, and there will be no new spots added, despite the potential of having up to 154 students. This doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration at all, and we firmly believe it's something that the school board should have been advised by their employees, the VSB staff. When we asked the VSB staff about it, we were told that French is a choice program, quote unquote, and so it's not assumed that they should have access to after-school care. We also want to note that Strathcona's population includes a lot of students with special needs, and we're not sure that there's been any analysis of how those students are going to be accommodated if the population is going to be increased so drastically. We're also concerned that the population increase will impact the Tier 1 status that we have, which includes additional supports that our student population really needs. Strathcona is a school that is constantly marginalized and given second thought, and it's kept divided by the French and the English status, as well as socioeconomic and racial status. And rather than in receiving an investment into bringing kids in the community together, the proposal does the opposite and actually kind of potentially will exacerbate the divide and the tensions in the school. The proposal as presented to the VSB is actually called, quote, French Immersion Program Review, Henry Hudson Focus, unquote, even though Strathcona would be equally impacted by the proposal. And I did point that out to the school board when we met with them, the school board staff, when we met with them last week, and they hadn't even been aware of the oversight. So it's yet another example of how Strathcona is continually overlooked. We call on the school board to strengthen and bring together existing student populations before imposing major changes on them in impossibly short timeframes. We don't feel that education can be used as a tool either implicitly or explicitly that fosters a divide among students and communities. In that respect, we are pleased that the proposal has allowed us to have a space to address our concerns about the equity issues at Strathcona, which we look forward to addressing with you in other forums. We reiterate that we oppose the proposal as written in both gradual and immediate forms. The proposal does not acknowledge or investigate the negative impacts to either Strathcona or Hudson, or propose further resources or timelines to ameliorate them. The immediate introduction would likely be disruptive of the whole Henry Hudson cohort, and we're completely concerned about the lack of detail in the proposal and the compressed consultation schedule. We understand that the school board staff have stated their intent to address the details once a decision is made. However, we strongly request that in the future, we oppose the current proposal, but in future work, we really suggest that you undertake planning first, and you bring to the parent and teacher communities and trustees all the details possible so that they can make an informed decision. Parents are extremely busy, and at Strathcona, many parents face their own barriers to participating in public processes. The information that's been provided about the proposal has been minimal, and while we appreciate that Hudson has a capacity, we ask that the school board ensure that it is taking enough time to meet the needs of students at Strathcona as well. Was that my 1-minute warning? Okay. We urge you to stop the timeline for the proposal, and we urge you to consider different processes for the future that would be more thorough. In the case of Strathcona, if you were going to add a student population, we think that a whole bunch of other things needs to happen first. If you are considering putting students into the buildings D and E, then we suggest that you invest in the seismic upgrading of those buildings. We suggest a very fulsome engagement with experts and parents to address the already existing equity issues at the school. And we would like to know that any future proposals would not be looking at just the numbers. We want to know that our kids are being counted individually. I'll close by saying that we fully support Henry Hudson's briefing note, and we are heartened to be able to work with the Henry Hudson PAC. And we certainly hope that their students don't have to get split up. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just going to ask committee members any questions, clarifying questions. Jennifer.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you so much for explaining your situation and also acknowledging some of the work that's already been done. I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more. You'd mentioned supportive programs. You talked about music, counseling, and a large population of Indigenous students that wouldn't be counted as space. Could you talk a little bit more about what some of those programs might look like for those of us who may not know?
Well, the programs that I'm talking about are programs that are right now, from what I understand, the school board considers rooms to be maybe a possibility for expansion into because they don't have an actual classroom in them. And so a room that has like a music program in it or an art program or a special needs learning room or a room where the First Nation support worker carries out her work. Those rooms aren't being considered right now in terms of possible space for an additional influx of students. So it's possible that if any of the options were to go forward with the Hudson EFI proposal, then the current programs that Strathcona enjoys would be bumped.
Carmen and then Anne.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned in your presentation the possibility of losing your Tier 1 status with the addition of more students. And I just wanted to ask, maybe this is more of a question of staff. Have you been told that there is a possibility of losing that status due to the addition of another population of kids?
My understanding, we spoke with staff about this. My understanding is that there's a number of kids classified as at risk. There's no division by the total population of the school. So the fact that the number of kids at risk would not necessarily decrease through the increase of student population does not actually put our Tier 1 status at risk. Our concern, though, is that the formula for calculation has been adjusted at various times, and to take at face value the idea that a district program would be potentially bringing an influx of socioeconomically more fortunate children into Strathcona might cause a later reclassification. And the programs that we have at Strathcona due to Tier 1 status, we really appreciate those. They're very heavily used and they're at capacity already. And we're concerned that while there may not be a direct impact on Tier 1 now, if that's later reclassified somehow, those could be at risk.
Just to clarify, the staff is not responding this evening because the report from staff will be coming at the next committee meeting. So staff will be asked, you can ask the question at that time. Thanks. Anne.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious because I have actually heard similar comments that there is quite a division between the French cohort and the English cohort at Strathcona. There doesn't seem to be the same kind of community that, say, Hudson has. And I was wondering if at any point the district was looking at the option of actually moving the French immersion program out of Hudson and perhaps into another school that might have space.
That would be...
Sorry, did I say Hudson? I meant Strathcona.
That would be where these are questions for the delegations if they want to do a quick response for that, but I think more of that for the staff report. But if you have any comments with regards to that?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. We do have a comment. At this point, Strathcona, much like Henry Hudson, we want to preserve the community. We want to preserve the students there. We are wanting the students to have more interaction, and we're wanting to work with the school to foster that rather than to increase the divide. We're not wanting to have our students, further separated from their peers. We feel like that's counterproductive to today and very opposite to reconciliation in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Next delegation is Jamie Smallboy, French Immersion program at Strathcona Hudson Elementary, a parent of a student from Strathcona. Thank you for coming, Jamie. And if you have a co-presenter, if you can introduce your co-presenter.
This is just a friend of mine who's holding my hand.
Thank you.
She's not part of the delegation. Good evening. I'm actually a parent of 5 children. Hello, I'm here to speak about the proposal about the increase to the French immersion program at Strathcona Elementary. My name is Jamie Smallboy. I'm the mother of 5 children, 2 of whom already graduated out of Strathcona, 3 of whom are currently attending. I just recently got custody of my children back from the ministry after 9 years. Over time, over that 9 years, caregivers came and went, foster parents came and went, but this school, Strathcona Elementary, and the community it has been the one consistent thing in their lives, the one consistent thing in their lives. The supports that my children have had at our school have never faltered, no matter what has been going on in my children's lives, that has been steady. That community spirit at that school is strong. The love that the children feel there from not just the staff, but their peers is incredible. So in the 9 years that my children were in care, the only exposure my children had to their culture was at our school, Strathcona. When their world fell apart, when they were taken away from their family, the only real people who were there for them were the staff at Strathcona School. That was the family that they had. A few weeks ago, one of the parents at the school reached out to me. She asked if I had heard about the French immersion program from Henry Hudson coming to Strathcona, and if I felt it would impact the school and my children. During the time that I heard all of this, I was preparing to get my kids back. The ministry was telling me that I would no longer get support, support for therapy for my son Clancy, no speech therapist for his speech needs, which is $130 a session for his speech therapy, $120 a session for his counseling, money that I don't have, cannot get. I wasn't worried though because I knew he had the supports at school. As a single mother of 5 who just got her kids back and have no supports from the government, these supports that my kids get at the school is all that I have. I depend on the lunch program. My children depend on the lunch program. I depend on the support the school gives my children. I'm dependent on the speech therapy for my son, the music program to teach the music. If you don't mind, I'd like to share you. One of the ladies had asked what kind of programs would be impacted, and my son Theron, he attends Strathcona, and for the life of me, I don't know where he got this from, but it's being nurtured at Strathcona, and if 154 more students were to come in, this is one of the programs that would be bumped. This is what we would be losing. He's not even looking at his music. That's how great the teachers are there. That's just a bit. He's truly amazing. But again, like I said, this is one of the programs that would be bumped if this proposal goes through. When I think of what priority, I got lost. Sorry. I am living at poverty level, if not below. So when I look to my kids' future, I know I need Strathcona Elementary and the limited supports it has, which I fear will be diminished if there are another 154 kids at this school. When I think of what is a priority at schools, I think of the supports children need to be fully educated. Not to sound discriminatory, but French immersion seems like a privilege, not a priority, not a need. They even call it a choice program. I'm talking about what my family needs, not some excess privilege. My kids are barely keeping afloat, and now I'm worried they're going to get pushed aside. My kids are treading water as it is. With the French immersion coming, another 154 kids, I'm worried my kids are going to sink. Some of these children's gifts are just barely being nurtured and acknowledged, like music programs, the Red Fox program, the after-school care program, the lunch program, outside activities, sports teams. These are the things that my children would not have available to them that are necessary for them to thrive. With 154 more kids, all those extras would be spread across a bigger group, and the children here from our neighborhood might fall through the cracks. Why do we keep marginalizing the marginalized, pushing them to the sidelines? I went to a school where I was a minority. I was looked at badly, treated badly, felt badly, all because I was poor and I didn't have the privilege that the other kids had. I don't want that for my kids. I don't want their culture, the culture of our school to change so that it reflects privilege and choice instead of the necessities that our kids are focused on. People keep talking about reconciliation, so where is it? It's not trickling down to our kids. Here you are trying to further promote a choice program, a privileged program, a program for kids who are able to drive across the city to attend. When will we prioritize the needs of those who don't have the ability or privilege? That would be true conciliation. So today I heard that the French immersion would be stripped away midstream from the Hudson children. And I heard how strongly they don't want that to happen. Just as strongly as I don't want any of the programs that our children have. I don't want that stripped from them at all. Take a long, hard look at what would be stripped from the children at Strathcona. Also hear that they want to put a stop to this and get back to the important issue about resizing their school. I wish the students at Strathcona and their families were living in a world where resizing their school or having a choice program interrupted was the only problem they had, but they don't. So please, I ask you to consider what you're taking away and from whom, what the consequences could be, and how far that will ripple. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. If you one moment, if you take some questions, if any members have any. First, I have a question. There was a program you were referencing that your son was in, where you played the music. What program is that? Do you know the name of that program?
Actually, one of the music teachers at Strathcona School, Mr. Butler, was the one that noticed Theron had a natural talent for playing the piano, and he went above and beyond and found an after-school program for Theron to attend, where he's been nurturing that little gift that he's got there.
Okay, thank you. Open it up for committee members. Jennifer.
Through the chair, thank you so much for your presentation and sharing your own personal story and experience. I think it really helps refocus the impacts of seemingly small decisions. But I also want to appreciate that you answered the question more specifically around the different programs in the school, just to help build the picture. So thank you.
Thank you for presenting, Jamie. Thank you for coming
this
evening. Next delegation is, thank you, is the Long Range Facilities Plan. Leslie Bolt, local business person. Hi, Leslie. Thank you for coming.
I'll be brief. Thank you for having me here today. As you mentioned, I'm a local business person. I want to express my support for the long-range facilities plans recommendations in a couple of cases, and then just to express a concern. I do want to express my support for the board's consideration of replacement schools versus upgrading where it makes sense. And there's been quite a bit of talk over the past couple of weeks or past week or so, I guess, is after this report came out around right-sizing schools. So making sure when those schools are being replaced that they're appropriate for the neighborhood and for their enrollment in those neighborhoods, but without taking those neighborhood schools out of those neighborhoods. And that's something that I strongly support. Again, where it makes sense and where it's cost effective. And there's also lots of opportunities to make these greener buildings and more energy efficient and create new opportunities for kids at the same time. Second, I just want to express my support for the recommendations around the leveraging of school board properties with long-term leases or partnerships to extract some of that value in those very valuable public lands that our school board owns, and that you can in turn help to fund the premiums that your staff mentioned that you occasionally bring to the table when it comes to major capital projects and seismic upgrades in new schools. And so I feel like as an observer and as an advocate, I feel like the Vancouver School Board could have done this more than it has to date. And I would just really urge you to pursue this more aggressively. I know it's a lot more work than maybe selling some property, which I'll get to in a moment. But I think it's going to yield long-term benefits, not just for the board, but for the school community, for the neighborhoods. If you're building housing or you're looking at strategic partnerships with other nonprofit organizations or businesses, there's just so much opportunity there. And because your land is so valuable, it's going to be in demand. So you have some power in these relationships. I noticed in the report there was a recommendation around hiring consultants. As a consultant myself, not a real estate consultant, I don't think that's a bad idea as long as you use our money well and hire the right people. But I do think it's a good idea to look into how you can leverage these properties to get the money that you need to make these improvements to our schools or to replace schools without selling the property. And that's the final point that I want to make is that I want you to know that I would strongly oppose any move by this board to approve this sale of any of VSB's properties. As you know, we're sitting on some of the most valuable real estate in the world, certainly in the country. And the notion of selling that property for short-term demands, as appealing as it might be to get that money, that cash right away, you're never going to see that property again. You know, a lot of my friends say if I sell my house or my condo in the city, I'll never own again because of the way property values are going up. So it's just not a good business decision in my view to sell property. And so it's just something that I would oppose strongly, and I certainly hope that's not something that the board is considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for the presentation. Short, but very, very clear as from a communications point of view. Before I open up for everyone else, and you're very clear where it says whole properties or portions of properties. May I ask, is that very clear? Because there are some properties that are, I guess, quite a bit larger. I won't name any specific schools, otherwise that will be out in the media right away of what you're looking at. But there are some schools with, I guess, weird angles or larger portions. Even those portions where it could help fund other projects, you're completely opposed to all sales of property. Because there is, school board has a policy where we wouldn't sell a school site, but there is possibilities of
I
course.
do understand that, and yes, I would be opposed to even a partial sale of a site, particularly given my earlier point around the opportunities to leverage that property to do other things with it. I mean, I don't know if you showed me a picture of a weird angle, I might be able to comment on that specifically, but generally speaking, in principle, I would be opposed to that.
Okay, thank you. And I'll open it up for the rest of the committee. Thank you, Leslie, for presenting, and I appreciate the written portion as well prior. The Britannia Board, and I know there's a different name here, and where it's Scott Clark, President of Britannia Board of Management. And thank you for coming out this evening, Scott.
Good evening, Scott Clark, Coast Salish citizen, President of Britannia Community Centre Board of Directors, as well as the Executive Director of Urban Indigenous organization known as Aboriginal Life in Vancouver Enhancement Society. Alan, this is round 3 in the last 9 years, school closures, east side of Vancouver. There's a reason why it's east side of Vancouver, which happens to be predominantly low-income people, refugees, immigrants, Indigenous peoples, and students with special needs. You didn't create that mess. You, our elected trustees, did not create that mess. I know that. We are in round 3 of school closures, and as I understand it, most of those school closures, if not upwards to about 30, are on the east side of Vancouver. You, as our elected officials, have a decision to make. You are our newly elected school board. There's a difference in round 3 of school closures. And the difference in round 3 is that we have a new provincial government, an NDP government partnered with the Green government. The 2 other rounds of school closures were a result of neoliberal policies by the BC Liberal government infiltrating and destroying our public school system throughout this province. Today, I thought we would be in a different place. You, as our elected trustees, have a decision to make, and that decision is an important decision. This provincial government, this federal government made commitments to the 94 calls of action to truth and reconciliation. The City of Vancouver has done that. The Vancouver Parks Board has done that. I'm not sure if the Vancouver School Board has committed to those 94 calls to action. I say that to you because you can go down this stream of questioning, the stream of thinking, the stream of making decisions, which is very colonial. And it's because of this 16 years of brutal cutbacks to our public school systems, millions upon millions of dollars being diverted to the those private schools. Meanwhile, all the seismic upgrades happened in certain places, but not on the east side. If you want to go down the colonial trail of continuing this process of threatening to cut 30 schools on the east side, impacting disproportionately our most impoverished populations, peoples who are victims of a system of human service delivery, which is privatizing our services. That's really what's at stake here. I am dismayed at our Minister of Education, Mr. Fleming, because when we had the last round of school closures over by Britannia, he came out to us, he made commitments to us. But I ask you as our elected leaders, what policy changes did Mr. Fleming make in the 2 years he's been our minister? I ask you that. I know you're governed by policies and procedures at the Vancouver School Board. Are your bureaucrats, your 6-figured salaried bureaucrats, are they thinking inside the box? Are they making you think inside the box? Because I would say to you, you are our new trustees. We put faith in you to shake up the system, get out of the box and into the circle. Look at the importance of schools as the heartbeats of our communities, the community centers and the neighborhoods as the living rooms of our communities. Look at the good work that's happening in the east side of Vancouver, and work with the communities, because we will stand with you. We will support you to go back to Minister Fleming and demand that he make the changes, demand that he gets out of this box and honor the reconciliation recommendations. Work with the federal government, work with the civic government, work with the Parks Board and the school board, save every one of those school properties, and find a way to get some social housing, some housing so our teachers can afford to live in Vancouver, so our families aren't all being pushed out to Surrey where we have the exact opposite thing happening. So the choice is yours. The choice is yours because you are the ones we elect. Are the bureaucrats out of the box into the circle here at the Vancouver School Board? Are the bureaucrats and our politicians in Victoria working with you, working with us? Because the decisions you're going to be making and the process that you choose to engage is going to re-traumatize another generation of children, another generation of youth, and another generation of families. And I know a lot of you trustees, and I know that's not what you want to do, but we need you to stand up, be strong, make your bureaucrats get into that circle, force Victoria and that Minister Fleming to come over here and follow up to his commitments that he would preserve our public school system. He would work with the other ministries to ensure we have safe, suitable, affordable housing, neighborhood by neighborhood. That's what we need you to do. I'm going to share with you that through our broad-based networks, and Janet Fraser knows this because she's always at our meetings, is that if you let these schools get closed, what you're going to be doing to so many families and pushing them out of this city, pushing them even further than Surrey, is going to be devastating. And I don't think any of you got elected on those premises. So I implore you to make our bureaucrats earn their monies at the Vancouver School Board level and in Victoria, and hold our minister accountable for his commitment to public education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Before you go, just going to ask members if they have any questions. But prior to that, this is because it's listed as Britannia Board of Management. Is this is representation of the Board of Management of Britannia?
Mr. Wong and Janet Fraser, who's attended our Youth Matters meetings for the past 6 years, knows that Britannia Community Center Board of Management stands 100 in support of our low-income, urban Indigenous, immigrant, refugees, and special needs students within our area. They've engaged the collective impact place-based strategy we've been building over the last 10 years to support our children, youth, and families to be fully included and engaged, living in safe, suitable, affordable housing. So my answer to you, Mr. Wong, is yes.
Yes, okay, thank you for that answer. Okay, open it up for questions on the presentation from committee members. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for coming. Next delegation from Britannia PAC. I just have initials here. Iona Monk and Karen Lamb?
Yes, thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good evening. We're all very distressed with the recent news of an attempt to consolidate more schools. I would like to advocate to vote no to the LRFP. I'd like to outline some important points why, which may apply to all schools, and I'm also going to highlight Britannia Secondary School. Britannia Secondary School is home to many Indigenous and at-risk youth. 30% of the students at Britannia are of Indigenous background. According to a CBC News report from September 2016, it was found that Britannia is, quote, situated in the poorest postal code in all of Canada and has a significant number of vulnerable kids, including many Indigenous kids. And these kids are working really hard and being supported by a variety of community organizations to succeed, end quote. Back in 2016, when we were taken off the chopping block, Mike Lombardi, past chair of the VSB, felt, quote, in the year of truth and reconciliation, this was the year to build on what Britannia had been doing, not to close it down, end quote.
Truth and reconciliation continue to be even more important today in 2019. Recently, we added a new national holiday on September 30th called Truth and Reconciliation Day. I'm concerned what message we're sending to the Indigenous community by simultaneously creating a day to reflect on the damage we've done while potentially causing even more stress and damage to our Indigenous youth by closing a vital neighborhood school. He went on to say that because BC is close to the bottom when it comes to education funding compared with other provinces, that the board, in order to fund seismic upgrades to make schools safer, trustees are forced to close schools to do that. He believed, and rightly so, that this was pitting school against school, and the board back in 2016 refused to do that. Why has this reasoning changed in 2019? In a 2017 article she wrote for the Georgia Straight, Patty Backus, past school board committee, presented a smart solution for the problem of seismic safety. Her advice is as follows, quote, instead of fussing around about schools with excess capacity and pressuring school boards to close and consolidate schools, just build new ones right-sized to fit current and future enrollment needs and bulldoze the old ones, except where there is significant heritage value. New schools are also built to a higher safety standard than upgraded ones and are far more likely to be usable after an earthquake than upgraded old ones are. It doesn't make sense to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade old buildings that would have to be torn down and rebuilt after an earthquake, which could be very likely the case. She said that new builds can often be done on site while the old buildings are used until the new ones are ready. That's what they did at McGee, Kitchener, Douglas, and Sexsmith schools. It's less disruptive than moving the students to other schools or portables while their old schools are being upgraded. Instead of pressuring the VSB to close schools like Britannia, like the Clark government did, get going now on building new schools on sites where there's room and use them for swing space for other schools if needed, end quote. If the plan to move the students of Britannia Secondary to Templeton Secondary seems more feasible, this would not be workable for a number of important reasons. In 2016, the board prepared a document entitled How Schools Are Identified for Potential Closure. Level 2 broad considerations involve seismic risk for the building and impacts in services and supports for vulnerable communities. Let's talk seismic risk first. The overall seismic rating given to both Britannia and Templeton are H1s, which are the lowest, with Templeton's being even worse than ours. As a partial seismic upgrade, it was completed at Britannia in 2003, with only 1/4 of our buildings with an H1 rating. Both are dangerous for our schools, both are dangerous for our children, but both are at high risk for seismic damage in the case of an earthquake. Moving the children from one to the other seems like a lateral at best and a dangerous move at worst. The second broad consideration to examine when identifying schools for potential closure are the impact, services, and supports for vulnerable communities. Britannia is home to, quote, the poorest postal code in all of Canada, with a significant percentage of vulnerable kids, including Indigenous children, who are working really hard and being supported by a variety of community organizations to succeed, end quote. In the VSB's 2016 Long-Range Facilities Plan, schools considered for potential closure, it was stated that, quote, it is important that the board take a thoughtful approach in assessing how students and families who may fall into the category of vulnerability could be impacted by school consolidation. Experience would indicate that vulnerable students tend to have more difficulty with change and transitions. However, it was difficult to determine and state with any certainty what the long-range educational and social effects of an actual school closure would be on these students and families. Vulnerable students tend to be more reliant on the relationships established in their existing schools than students who are not considered vulnerable. It would be important to consult with those who work most closely with vulnerable students in order to determine what impacts might occur, end quote. Let's look at some research on those impacts. In 2016, a Vancouver Sun article examined the longer commute that Britannia students would face should Britannia be shut down. From Britannia to Templeton, it's a 20-minute walk added onto the current commute time of our students. The current maximum distance any student in our catchment must cover is 2.9 kilometers. The proposed maximum distance a student would need to travel if our students got redirected to Templeton is 3.7 kilometers, almost another full kilometer of commuting. Free bus passes used to be provided to students who needed them, but the district can no longer afford this. Britannia does have a significant number of students who are vulnerable in our catchment area, and that includes the downtown east side. There will be a number of new challenges that already vulnerable kids will now face. Walking further with the proposed change is one more barrier to kids being able to get access to education. There will be students who will be less motivated to get to school when it is farther from them. Not a wise move. The best solution is to keep neighborhood schools for students in the catchment. In an article from Spatial Economic Analysis from 2018, studying whether one of the determinants of academic performance in higher education is the geographical distance separating the place of study and the place of family residence, 12 years of data on students found that distance is a negative determinant of academic performance. In a 2016 article from the New Times, it was found that there was a negative correlation between distance traveled and school performance. Similarly, a recent study conducted by Germany-based Education International showed that long journeys to school have a negative impact on students' health and on their academic achievement levels. It was also shown that there was a direct correlation between longer journeys to school and disorganized concentration in class. Students who arrive at school sweaty, stressed, or tired are at risk for compromised performance. Students with longer commutes can also be exposed to many more things on their way to school, which may negatively affect them. Another correlation was found between longer distance traveled and absenteeism. Many of our youth are already struggling with caring for younger siblings and working jobs to make ends meet for their families. Asking them to travel longer distances means asking them to wake up even earlier than they already do and work later in the evenings on homework. It is dangerous to put this added stress and pressure onto an already fragile and taxed population. The shorter distance our at-risk youth travel to attend Britannia helps them to attend, which is vital to their future success and the breaking of this destructive cycle of poverty that many already find themselves in. Another article, The Impact of Commuting Time on Youth School Performance, from the Journal of Regional Science, found that duration of commuting has a negative causal impact on academic performance for youth. If we truly care about the damage that we cause to the Indigenous people of this land, then offering these students easy access to education without added obstacles is a move we need to make, especially when you consider that we currently have one of the largest graduation rates in Vancouver for our Indigenous community. It's working. Easy access will be truly instrumental in creating opportunity and change for these people, as well as keeping the fabric of our community alive. Our students need Britannia. If money is the issue, and we're actually choosing the mighty dollar over true reconciliation, which includes financial sacrifice, compromise, and change, then what message are we truly sending around truth and reconciliation? Britannia Secondary is also home to the Hockey Academy Mini School, and Patty Backus, past school board trustee, said that the school's hockey program and proximity to the ice rink, community center, and library are additional reasons why the school should not be closed. Moving this program to Templeton would not be workable for the hockey mini either, as it is not close at all to an ice rink for practice. Should the schools consolidate, another of our concerns would be the overly large population of the new catchment. As future development grows, so will the population. In fact, the current enrollment projection for 2030 at Britannia Secondary is expected to increase from 550 to 641 students without international students. As families move east to more affordable neighborhoods and as current local families mature, the school will be needed to accommodate this long-term growth. Perhaps as a suggestion, unused capacity at Britannia could be used and expanded for housing for teachers as our city's housing becomes more and more unaffordable. Britannia Secondary and its diverse student population is an integral piece of the fabric of our community. The youth keeps our community alive, vibrant, and growing. They access the community center, library, and ice rink and create an exciting and creative energy that would otherwise be missing if Britannia were to be closed. Too many communities in Greater Vancouver are disappearing, and this is a serious concern. We need the youth, and they need us to keep the city alive. Let's not pit school against school, but rather let's keep the bigger picture in mind, teaching our community what is really important in our fight for better education for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Iona and Karen. We've got a 6 bullets or 5 bullets here. So is there a possibility to share your presentation, maybe a soft copy, to us, and then we can share it with, because you referenced a few articles, you've referenced a number of things, and we couldn't notate it fast enough.
So just to let you know, I'm a Britannia grad myself from way back in the day, and absolutely, so just to let you know that we've put a lot of work into this, and obviously we know how to put together a paper, even though we're from the poorest district. Or the poorest school in the district, I should say. So yes, we'll definitely send you a copy.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen.
As well as the appendices and the research that I quoted.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Thank you for a well-written report.
Thank you.
Open up for questions. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. right. Next is Linda Chow. Okay, all right. Just an update that with regards to our video streaming and live streaming, the video is down, but the audio is working, so people can still hear the presentations outside of this room. All right, and Linda, any particular representation of organization or a parent, or how should I?
Denise and I come here on behalf of Templeton Secondary School, and I'm here also on behalf of Dr. A.R. Lord Elementary School.
Templeton and A.R. Lord. Yes. Thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns with this long-range facilities plan draft. My family has been impacted repeatedly by the threat of our child's Vancouver School Board school being closed for the last 9 years, beginning with Dr. A.R. Lord Elementary and now with Templeton Secondary. A.R. Lord's smaller building was closed and boarded up in July of 2010. The school community had fought to keep it open, as we could see even then that our neighborhood population of young families was growing. Eventually, the building became the new location for the VSB's Sunrise Alternative Program. Just over 2 years ago, that program was moved to Templeton. The smaller A.R. Lord building is now fully occupied by the VSB Genesis program and by PLE Community Services, and is generating revenue for the VSB. The larger A.R. Lord building is at near full capacity with VSB elementary students. Therefore, the long-range facilities plan, Appendix H, school capacities, is extremely misleading and indeed incorrect in its reporting that A.R. Lord is at mid 40% range capacity. There is absolutely no logical or ethical reason for that figure. To include a fully revenue-generating asset as part of the school capacity for enrollment statistics is highly misleading and erroneous for all affected. This aspect of the Ministry of Education and the LRFP process must be corrected to reflect accurate data calculations by including only buildings that hold VSB enrolled students for the purpose of acquiring capacity analyzation statistics. For the last 9 years, I've worked tirelessly in the effort to save our neighborhood public schools from closure. From the grassroots level of helping to organize rallies, to a door-knocking petition drive in the community, to attending VSB meetings, open house presentations, media interviews, and writing letters. It has been a long and exhaustive process, and my frustration continues now that my child attends Templeton. Imagine, if you will, a child that started in the Vancouver public school system in 2009, and the entire time from kindergarten to high school, their family is fighting to eliminate their school from a closure and/or consolidation list. Youth are nervous, concerned, wondering, will they be forced to move to a distant school? Will they lose their school community and the teachers they have forged a bond with? Could they lose access to programs and activities that have helped them on their path to adulthood? Might they lose access to certain classes they were aspiring to enroll in for coming years? Templeton is an ideal-sized school for secondary grades with access to many indoor and outdoor athletic opportunities on-site and directly next door at Templeton Park Pool. As well, there are a multitude of amazing education opportunities inside the school that stretch across a broad spectrum of choices. It is home to the renowned Templeton Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math program, also known as STEM. Quoting a Vancouver Courier article, the STEM program is the first of its kind in the province. Templeton staff collaborated with BCIT, UBC, SFU, and industry partners to ensure STEM provides students the skills they need to thrive in future studies and workplaces. Students are learning complex problem-solving, communication, and time management skills, along with technical expertise, end quote. STEM students have won awards at competitions, fellowships, and in 2018, a STEM student was awarded the prestigious Loran Scholarship. He was chosen out of an initial pool of over 5,000 Canadian students. This is a testament to the value of the program and the spirit of the community. Templeton is also home to the invaluable VSB Secondary Life Skills Program, with an incredible supportive team of staff, and home to the excellent school-based VSB Sunrise Alternative Program for grades 8 through 10. The school is also home to a sacred room, primarily used for First Nations and activities and support as an integral part of the school's Indigenous community. As well, Templeton is known for its highly regarded theater and film programs and has a district mini school program. Templeton shares a close working partnership with its family of feeder elementary schools, one of which is A.R. Lord. Templeton students often walk to those schools to help at events such as science fairs and sports day and to volunteer with community school team after school programs. Elementary school students, usually grades 6 and 7, will walk to Templeton to take part in an event such as the Science Challenge or school orientations in preparation for grade 8. The location of Templeton and proximity of the elementary schools and the surrounding community is important to all. It is a safe, accessible, walkable distance for students, which is a vital component of the Greenest City Action Plan 2020, which includes, and I quote, vibrant and inclusive neighborhoods and an internationally recognized city that meets the needs of generations to come, end quote. Templeton Secondary School as a whole is an inclusive, accessible, and caring environment for a diverse range of our children to learn, to grow, and thrive. So, a question for you. The City of Vancouver, as an internationally recognized city with its business opportunities, real estate, entertainment, culture, sports, environment, healthcare, and more, why are its young people and their public schools so undervalued by government? The politics of the VSB should not prioritize the generation of revenue by selling assets, closing schools, or cutting programs. The VSB needs to leave schools where they are and right-size them if need be by renting out space or partnering with appropriate organizations such as PLE, childcare or preschool operations, or other community partnerships. Foster an open and transparent dialogue. Listen to families, students, and communities surrounding the individual schools. Incorporate their suggestions before finalizing and voting on the draft. Never, ever use public education funds to hire real estate consultants. Never use public education funds for anything other than providing safe, quality, inclusive, inspiring education to all public school students. Be open to listening to and incorporating documented information from reliable sources other than Barragar systems. We see the massive growth of families in our communities of Hastings, Sunrise, and Grandview Woodlands. Houses and laneway homes are being built all over the neighborhood, and multi-level rentals and condominiums are being constructed all around us. Families with babies and toddlers are everywhere at the community centers, parks, and shopping areas in the neighborhood. It is more than obvious Northeast Vancouver is an area of high growth, and the City of Vancouver fully intends it to be. If that were not the case, Vancouver would suffer greatly in the next 10 years. Please be aware of these facts and realize that it makes no sense whatsoever to close our schools and to sell any VSB buildings or property. Our children are the future. They should not continue to be used as pawns in a political and financial process. Templeton and A.R. Lord are invaluable East Vancouver schools and must not be closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I'll open it up for, and I don't have it in my package, but I do remember reading it from somewhere, the questions and everything. So, but if we could get it sent again, just to be certain that we have it. Open up for committee members. Questions, comments? Janet and then Jennifer.
More a comment than a question, just, obviously it's been a long time that you've been advocating for schools in your neighborhood, and, that's much appreciated. We know that every school in Vancouver is a great school, and every school has a proud and passionate school community. So thank you for coming to speak tonight.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thanks to the chair. Thank you so much. And also to the last delegation, I think like bringing some light to the impacts on young adults and also the proximity to the elementary school, like that really helped kind of build a picture of what your school community looks like.
Thank you very much for coming out, Linda, and presenting once again. Next delegation. I'll let them decide. It was separate, then it was together, then it's separate again. So Denise Lee and Aaron Roberts.
Yes, I think we need to be separate.
Separate?
Any of Aaron's time.
Sure.
I don't have to move because
it's not personal.
I seem to bridge across schools here.
Sure, okay. So I have it as Denise first.
Sure.
Thanks. Both are parents of students from Telecom Annex. Right?
That's right.
Yeah,
And forgive me if I talk fast. I don't want to go over time, but I was timing myself and cutting it close. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Denise A. Lee. I'm a parent of a Telecom student and an active member of the Telecom Pact for almost 10 years. Tonight I will be addressing the inclusion of Telecom in the long-range facilities plan proposal for potential closure and merger with Hastings Elementary. Telecom Community Annex School is located at Nanaimo and Cambridge Streets in the Hastings Sunrise neighborhood of East Vancouver. We are a designated inner-city school and annexed to Hastings Elementary. Telecom strives to be a safe and caring school that places the highest priority on the needs of our students and their families. Many of our families at Telecom depend on the school as part of a support network to allow them to work and survive. By June of 2018, we saw a rise in the demand to attend Telecom. The kindergarten enrollment had enough students to fill 2 kindergarten classes, increasing the school's capacity by almost 20%. The expansion of 2K classes did not happen, and the status quo of 1K remained. Students, some living across the street from the school, that were not chosen through a lottery system, were pushed to alternative locations. It is difficult to expand Telecom's capacity utilization when enrollment continues to be suppressed. As a designated inner-city school, we have a very mixed demographic. We currently have 109 students from kindergarten to grade 4, making up 6 divisions. The school's population reflects our very diverse surrounding community, with approximately 34% English language learners, 23% special needs students, and 21% Indigenous students. Many of our most vulnerable families struggle to just get to school every day, most of them on foot. The impact of Telecom closing and merging with Hastings increases the challenge to attend and to remain in school. If Telecom were to close, the impact on First Nations students would be great. Currently, our Aboriginal support worker is able, due to the size of the school, to truly be involved with our First Nations families and all students in all classes. The entire school is provided with teachings from an elder in cultural exposure, language, and First Nations experiences. First Nations students receive culturally appropriate support and inclusion in an environment where they are welcome, celebrated, and well represented as part of the school body. Telecom is the chosen school by many parents of special needs children. Because the school is small, their children are known by all teachers, staff, and students as individuals. They are easily accepted amongst their peers, and the chances of bullying or other incidents is decreased dramatically. The higher proportion of special needs children brings down the numbers of students per class because class sizes are adjusted due to the number of students needing extra attention. An annex or smaller school means fewer number of kids on the school grounds as well at one time and is less overwhelming to many kids with special needs. Approximately 1/3 of Telecom students are English language learners. Some are displaced refugees, some are new immigrants. These children are learning English at school, while families have access to English instruction across the courtyard at Kiwasa Neighborhood House. Uniquely situated, Tillicum and Kiwasa Neighborhood House are jointly located within one city block. They sit together on the city block, only separated by a courtyard. Kiwasa is a lifeline for many vulnerable families. Convenience is a major factor. There are families where a parent drops off their child at school, then works on their GED, or sees a support worker at Kiwasa in the day, then picks their child up after school. A large percentage of children at Tillicum are either food insecure or at risk. Some of Kiwasa's services include free student and family breakfast on school days, low-cost after-school care, drop-in family place, hosted food banks and food programs, immigrant and translation services, and supportive housing. All these support vulnerable families and are vital connections. Tillicum shares its building with a well-attended Strong Start program, where children and families build a relationship with the school before the child possibly attends. The closure of the school would also mean the closure of this program, which prepares the children of local families for school and helps parents receive parenting support and referrals to services. A higher proportion of students' families than usual are involved with social services at Tillicum. The school counselor visits on a regular basis, and our youth and family worker has years of trusting relationships with families in need of support. Again, due to the size of the school, the worker can work with every class each week to teach socio-emotional skills such as self-regulation and inclusion. Working with a whole class means kids who need support are not singled out and do not miss out on any teaching time. A closure of our school would sever these relationships, and students and families would be forced to start over in unfamiliar environments with unfamiliar professionals. Closing Tillicum and merging with Hastings poses many problems. The needs of Tillicum students will not change with location. The closure of Tillicum would result in the loss of valuable staff that have cultivated and nurtured a way of connecting with students that very, very few schools have accomplished. While transitioning back to work after having kids, I worked as an on-call supervision aide for a couple years with the VSB. I had the opportunity to work in schools all across the district. If you were to ask any TOC or on-call support worker that have subbed at Tillicum, their impression of our school, they would tell you what a unique and special environment it is. With specialized programs and these specialized programs and relationships would be lost at Hastings. The design and scope of size does not permit the learning style Tillicum has cultivated. It is a great school, Hastings. It is our sister school to Tillicum. My oldest child has attended Hastings after Tillicum and now goes to Templeton. While both administrations and PACs work hard to foster a connection between the two schools, they are very, very different. Tillicum's mission statement is to ensure a safe, nurturing, and challenging educational environment encompassing the school community where all students achieve their potential as lifelong learners. We participate in reading recovery, early literacy reading intervention, and we are a model of SEL, social emotional learning, with our Mind Up and Jump Start programs in the morning and Ready Bodies Learning Minds for Ks and 1s throughout the week. All of us within the Tillicum community know it is a very special, unique place where we know all the students, at least by sight. We get to know our neighbors through the school. We forge relationships that build networks and community by crossing income and marginalization lines. When the Vancouver School Board, you can close your eyes at this point, dreams of the ideal school, one that is accepting of all students, a stellar staff that has worked together for decades, cohesively above and beyond the norm, administrations that have nurtured and enhanced the school vision, a community of social, spiritual, and parental support with grassroots and open arms, and most importantly, the most delightful, beautiful children. You'll find all these qualities and more at Tillicum. When considering a school for closure, how does the learning and well-being of the most vulnerable students factor into the decision? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Denise. I'm just going to move it right over to Aaron, and then so when if there's any questions from the committee members, you can tag team. Okay, Aaron.
Great, thank you. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see you all. I'm a brand new Canadian citizen as of 2 months ago, and so it's a particular joy. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It's a particular joy and privilege to be here participating in this civic discussion. I'd like to talk about the proposal that Tillicum Annex be joined to Hastings Elementary, and I want to tell you why I think that they should be kept separate schools. The Vancouver Foundation is a substantial charity in Vancouver. They have about $1 billion worth of assets, and they're pulled in many directions. And so they undertook a huge survey a number of years ago to try and focus their efforts, and by discovering what's the big problem facing Vancouver. And so they polled about 275 organizations, charitable organizations, about 4,000 individuals, about 100 community leaders. And they asked, what's our big problem? And they expected people to say, our big problem is poverty or homelessness, drug addiction, etc. Sort of the stuff that dominates the headlines. And those are very serious issues. And people did talk about these things, but none of them emerged as the big issue. What people said concerned them the most in Vancouver was a surprise, and it was this. It was the growing sense of isolation and disconnection. And they had 4 key findings, and here they are. Metro Vancouver can be a very hard place to make friends. 2, our neighborhood connections are cordial but weak. 3, many people in Metro Vancouver are retreating from community life. And lastly, over a third of us have no close friends outside our own ethnic group. Okay, why am I telling you all this? The Vancouver Foundation is telling us that people in this city are living increasingly in silos. So now we have a very important question. Where is this not happening? Because these are places we want to protect, and Tillicum Annex is one of these places. And it's a function of its size, it's a function of its walkability and catchment, and it's a function of its connection to the community centre right beside it. Tillicum Annex. I've always thought the phrase annex or the word annex was such an inelegant word to attach to the end of the name of a school. Do you know what it means? It means to attach. And that's exactly what this school does. It attaches people in a very precious way. Since my kids have started attending, I've got 2 kids in the school. I've got 1 more starting in September. Since my kids have started attending, we as immigrants to this country have become friends with the most diverse range of people. We're friends with Native families. We've become very close with this family of Syrian refugees. And in sort of the other end of the spectrum, we've become friends with this these folks that own this large business downtown, and they casually mentioned to me the other day they had a season pass to the Fairmont Hotel in Whistler. I didn't even know that was something you could do. So we have these wonderful relationships, and they're thriving because of the size of the school, because it's a neighborhood school. We all live within walking distance of each other. It's beautiful. It's a precious place. My middle daughter has Down syndrome. Her name is B. And when she started school a year and a half ago, we were not worried about her being accepted. Because let me tell you why. I remember the day she started, and I remember us walking into the schoolyard with her. Most people already knew her name. We're walking into the schoolyard and the other parents are going, B, it's so nice to see you, welcome to school. The teachers, other parents, other kids knew her name before she set foot in the school, because the school is so neighborhood focused. All these other parents, we know the other parents and kids because we play in the same parks that are right there. We go to the same community center. I can't tell you how significant that has been for us. So there's a suggestion that Telecom Annex is closed and the students are incorporated into Hastings Elementary. The antonym, or the opposite of the word annex, is disengage, disunite. That's what that would do. Vancouver has a significant problem. We are becoming increasingly disconnected, and this little school in this little neighborhood is a treasure, and it provokes community in such a beautiful way, and it's a means of bringing people together in a way that larger schools just don't do. So the Vancouver Foundation is asking itself, okay, we've got $1 billion here. What can we do to help build a more connected and engaged community in Metro Vancouver? And can I humbly suggest that that same question is considered when you make this decision about Telecom Annex? Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Aaron and Denise. Thank you for their presentation. Just going to open it up for committee members if they have any clarifying questions. You both. Oliver, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you both for coming. My children also attend an annex in the district, and your comments really resonated with me. So I appreciated you coming out and sharing your experiences. I think it's good for the board, who don't all have elementary school aged children in the community, to kind of hear the impact and the importance of neighborhood schools in our community. So thank you.
With regards to, and I pretty well have the notes, Denise had statistics, and in my notes I don't have, I jotted them down pretty quickly. Is it possible for the committee members to get your report? Okay. With the statistics on it. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, it's all in here. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yuri Hornbury, parent of a student from Franklin. Yuri, you have the floor.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Hi, thank you. Hi, my name is Yuri Hornberg, actually. I'm here to speak to you about, actually, first of all, I'm representing the Franklin Community School Association, which may not be noted. It's different from the Franklin Community School PAC, but it's an association of parents and community members around the Franklin School. Yes. I'm here to comment on the long-range facilities plan. When my kids leave the house to go to school, the things I worry about the most are earthquakes and the hazards of traffic. Franklin Elementary is a high-risk school of collapse, and it is time to do something about it. Also, the Franklin neighborhood is on something of an island surrounded by busy roads. There is an urgent need to rebuild schools as quickly and as cost-effectively as possible. The history and situation of our school. Franklin was built about 100 years ago on a hillside. The population is 200 students at about 72% of capacity. The seismic risk of the main block is H1, which is most vulnerable structure at highest risk for widespread damage or structural failure, not repairable after a design level event. The earthquake results. The result of an earthquake is very likely that the main building will collapse. Then a nearby retaining wall you see on the lower right there will most likely also fail, and the building will slide down the hill. If the earthquake happens during school hours, the result would be devastation. We have options. One option is to rebuild the school and rebuild it as cost effectively as possible. And I believe that's in no extras, no playgrounds, no extra spaces and things like that. It's very upsetting to me that while other schools are being rebuilt to be seismically made safe, that groups lobby for extras such as playgrounds and extra space while our kids go to a school where they will be crushed in an earthquake. The other option is to close the school. If the school is closed, it is a long way to the nearest Vancouver school and traffic is hazardous. The closest school is actually in Gilmore on the Burnaby side, but there is limited capacity there as well. And of course, we don't want to lose the students to the Burnaby and make them responsible for students that are living within and paying taxes within Vancouver. Transportation is challenging. Franklin is 2 blocks from the intersection of Hastings and Highway 1. Traffic through the neighborhood largely comes from outside and is becoming more dense. If the school is closed, kids would be exposed to more traffic. Parents driving kids will add to the existing traffic. And as long as the Adirondack overpass remains open to vehicle traffic, it is very hazardous to cycle. And these are my kids. They started in 2008 in kindergarten. The Provincial Seismic Mitigation Program was announced in 2004. Since then, my child has started and finished in Franklin and has gone to Templeton High School, which is also high risk of collapse. My second child has spent almost 8 years at Franklin and is also going to Templeton. From 2008 to 2019, and likely to 2024, every school day I'm aware I am sending them to a building that will collapse in an earthquake. I have developed a comprehensive earthquake preparedness plan for my home, but while my kids are at school, all I can do is keep a crowbar and a sledgehammer near the back door. The time for action is now. Kids need safe schools. Our neighborhood needs a new school within its catchment because the school is at high risk of collapse. There are high traffic risks to leave the neighborhood, and the school has good enrollment and is projected to be constant. Thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Yuri, for your very blunt presentation, very clear presentation, and I appreciate that. I just want to open it up for delegation or committee members to the delegation. Janet?
So, I'll make the comment that, I appreciate that there are many families in our district who are sending their students to seismically unsafe schools every day. And certainly it's the intent of our board to move forward the seismic program as quickly as possible. With the new provincial government, they also have that priority. So, we're trying to work as best we can with the provincial government to move things forward as fast as we can. And obviously until every student is seismically safe in the district, that work will continue.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you for the presentation. Next delegation, Sheldon North. And Sheldon, just for the recorder, representing any specific organization or parent of? Or?
Kids. I've got
Perfect.
Kids at Franklin. Fortunately, through presentations, we've covered off. Thank you, Yuri. Through the presentations, we've covered off
the vast majority of talking points I had. As Yuri's mentioned, Franklin's cut off by the highway from the rest of the city, so the school is the community place. It's not a fancy facility. The large playground is gravel with some new equipment, which is good, but it is where people go to meet the neighbors. We don't have any other community center, any other library, and other facilities there. As Yuri's noted, that have it being cut off by the city, it actually gets quite pronounced with when the Ironworkers Bridge backs up, it backs up Hastings, and individuals can't drive out of the community. Very concerned about students having to cross through the traffic. There's lots of road rages and just frustrations with people who can't get to work where they need to get to. So I do think that building new schools, not just for the existing demands we have there, but also for the increased density. We're definitely seeing the increased density in our community, increasing enrollment at Franklin. That's a positive. We really like having more people, more density, better businesses around us. But I do think that the school board needs to look in their planning in a lot longer horizon. So while I have concerns with the forecast for 2027 for our school, given that it's very hard to find any additional space. They're turning away kids at all levels except for my daughter's, who's 8 in her class. That's my understanding. But as density increases in the community, these especially community schools that we've been hearing about are more and more critical. So I'd strongly encourage to have a much longer planning schedule. 100 years is not, I know that's impossible for you to forecast, but if you just look at the densities, immigration, those rates, and go with a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year trends and try to see what we need for capacity. And this school is nearly 100 years old, planning out facilities for that. I echo a lot of the comments about leasing space within these buildings. Franklin is doing really well to maintain capacity, will increase, but in the future, we'll need a much larger school with the densities increasing around us. The final point I'd have is around warning systems. That I know there's lots of difficulties with facilities getting things moving, but having warning systems put in, these are out there. Even if you get in a basic system that will allow kids to evacuate out, that means a lot. People are losing sleep and concerned about the risks to our kids, and also evacuation planning and testing where kids are evacuated from the space. As Yuri showed there in the figures, this building is not going to survive a major earthquake. You want to be getting kids out after a warning, and just pushing for that really hard. So trying to get that put in place as quickly as humanly possible. The community is willing to help, but obviously I'd encourage that across all schools in the district. And yeah, it's just really frustrating and hard to understand how that's in place in private schools within Vancouver, and it's not my understanding in any of the public schools. So that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Oh, one moment, Sheldon. Thanks. And that's, you're talking warning systems, seismic warning systems.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Not tonight, but we'll ask staff. There was discussions around the seismic warning systems.
A very quick comment on that. I do work at a geotechnical engineering firm, and it sounds like they're getting near 3-minute predictions. And so for my kids, I understand they're given the just drop and cover type warning. And I'm very tempted to just tell my kids, you get out of that building. Whether or not there's the warning, but if you have 3 minutes, we evacuate our engineering building within less than 3 minutes. We practice, we drill. It would be really good to have the school board supporting getting the kids out of the space as quickly as possible and testing them on that, not just annually, but even monthly.
Thank you. There was a report a number of years ago at the school board with regards to the seismic warning, but we'll save that for another date. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. I have a question with regards to, and if you can elaborate, and Yuri brought this up, with regards to the crossing of a major intersection, such as Hastings and along Boundary. For the committee members, if you can describe that, if one doesn't live in around that area, that the traffic along the Hastings to Franklin and
yeah. So when we moved to the community about 12 years ago, my wife and I said we didn't want to live across any bridges or have to commute because that would be an issue. But ironically, when the ironworkers gets busy, it backs up right past Boundary well into Burnaby. And so then we have cars cutting through the community, and we've been working with the city of Vancouver on traffic calming, safety for the kids, things like that. But the road rage is significant enough where I've seen vehicles just try to cut into oncoming traffic, spin out, take out a bus shelter without people in it, but it's quite intense, I'd say. We see lots of accidents at the intersection that crosses the highway, and that would be the main crossing that students would take if they were going to walk to another school. We would probably drive our kids, but talking with our seismic experts, driving them in the car actually has a higher risk for the travel time compared to being in the school. So
I would think so as well. Thank you. Opening up for committee members, clarifying questions. No. I really appreciate the presentation, Sheldon. Thank you. Next up is Aaron Leung. Hi, Aaron. Thank you. And we have your package. Thank you.
Someone here tonight noted that my submission makes up a quarter of the package. I'm sorry. I went through some committee minutes last night and pulled some of the notable documents. The last one that I sent to trustees last year with all of the committee's work was 50 pages. So this was a little bit shorter. So my name is Aaron Leung. I'm the past chair of the City of Vancouver Children, Youth and Families Advisory Committee. Also proud graduate of Cook Elementary when we went through seismic upgrades. I moved 3 times and packed boxes all those times, and also graduated from Killarney Secondary in 2015. My advisory committee, which currently stands discharged, except City Council reinstated us tonight with a process underway to reappoint committee members through the coming months. But we are a 21-person advisory committee with a mandate to advise City Council, School Board, and Parks Board on matters related to children, youth, and families, which, as you can imagine, is basically everything that the city does. We've touched things like family housing, transportation, zoning, big city plans, amendments to big city plans, as well as other social programs. Our committee mandate is made up of 2/3 of it's made up of members under the age of 22. Our youngest member at the time that we were at the time when our committee mandate expired in November, our youngest member was 7. And the 2/3 that make up our committee membership between under the age of 14 and 15 to 21, a lot of them were high school students who are either now on their way to university, but all of them were VSB students. So in 2016, the committee took a position on the initial long-range facilities plan produced by the VSB, and we met with multiple MLAs to discuss our concerns with the ministry, who at the time imposed a 95% utilization ratio. And we were also concerned with the budget cuts. I met with, I think, half of the NDP caucus in Vancouver, as well as 1 BC Liberal MLA. All of the NDP MLAs discussed their concerns with the 95% utilization ratio and were opposed to school closures, as well as concerns the students had raised with budget cuts and their school programming. A copy of that letter in motion is in the package. The committee also took a position on the 2016 Peter Milburn forensic audit. Specifically, I want to highlight our concerns with the disposal of public property. I won't read out each recommendation that we opposed, but a lot of them were related to getting someone to assess the value of the VSB's assets, and specifically the concern there was for sale. That the committee, made up of young residents who want to preserve these assets for future generations, were very concerned with the sale of school land. We were also concerned at the time with the recommendation that Kingsgate Mall be sold at market rates to fund the operating budget. Some trustees on this board may remember when the ministry was then going to allow us to fund the operating budget through the sale of a capital asset, and we were very concerned and also opposed that. We were opposed to school closures and land disposals in general. That's also outlined by some of the motions that I've attached to the document. All of these motions were adopted unanimously through the committee. Every single young committee member was concerned about their school closing, the impacts on the lives that they wanted to live in Vancouver one day, the impacts of selling school assets, and the impacts on future generations. So tonight I'm here to speak to 4 concerns: the lack of public consultations, the concerns regarding the capacity utilization projections and data quality, concerns regarding equity and community impacts, and addressing how the long-range facilities plan impacts and potentially conflicts with the environmental sustainability plan that the board adopted last year. So I've participated in dozens of public consultations, facilitated a couple as a consultant, not for the City of Vancouver, but for other consulting groups. I've worked with multiple staff departments as chair of my committee. I've seen dozens of presentations come through my committee, and never, and I mean never, have I been told that there is no plan for public consultation on a major plan. Every plan that the City of Vancouver has put through has gone through a rigorous advisory committee process and often results in unanimous recommendation to City Council from all the given advisory bodies at the City of Vancouver. We often work in tandem with staff, improving recommendations, working with City Councilors to improve recommendations, and there is most of the time very little opposition to the plan staff put forward after going through this rigorous process. My main concern with that is that I think other members of the public here tonight have raised concerns with the lack of process moving forward and the very short timeline of moving into April where the board will consider adoption. I think that the public and members of the public here tonight are demanding that we get a better process, and I think we deserve one. Two committee meetings, this one today, the one last week, and the one I think that's coming up next week isn't enough, as well as one single email account the public can email. I'm asking for a broad stakeholder consultation process where stakeholders can come in at multiple points where the LRFP is being considered to provide their input and guide staff's direction to the board. I think that's hugely important. In 2016, when the initial plan came to my committee, I had asked staff, at the time it was a consultant and the manager of facilities, whether or not we had a way or a ballpark of estimating our capacity utilization without including non-enrolling space. At the time, I was told that staff did not have that number, that this was a ministry commissioned report, and therefore that number would not be available. Again, today, I am urging trustees to direct staff to get a utilization capacity that excludes non-enrolling space added as an appendice to the long-range facilities plan so the public, as well as yourselves, can make a well-informed decision about the future of our community spaces. Also, during the 2018 budget process, I sat in this chair, also speaking to concerns about public consultation, and asked the board to work on formulating a broad stakeholders consultation plan. We've heard concerns tonight about the Hudson Strathcona proposal. We're hearing concerns tonight about the LRFP. We had concerns about last year's budget process. And I think it's really important that the board has a stakeholder consultation strategy that we can all point to and hold as the standard for what the public and the board and staff expect of their public consultation processes so that we can have a fulsome discussion. There've also been concerns raised to me, as well as I'm a geographer and academic. I'm almost done my degree at SFU, doing geography and spatial data analysis. Members of the public have raised to me that there are discrepancies in the long-range facilities plan appendices. Most notably, one parent noted that the Cavell PDR for Seismic listed the FCI of that facility as 0.6, and in the LRFP it is now 0.53. And there are questions about how that number could go down without, in their view, any facilities maintenance. And last year's PDR for Cavell, they're noticing that discrepancy, as well as some have also listed concerns with current school population numbers. For example, some parents have noted to me that the data for AR Lord currently lists their population in the LRFP as 159 students, but both they and the Ministry of Education note that their current school population is at 184. It is imperative, if we are making decisions based on these numbers, that we have accurate numbers that all of us believe in. And right now, I believe that members of the public have raised very genuine questions about how these projections have been done, the quality of the data in this report, of how we're basing our decision on whether or not to consider consolidating facilities. So tonight, I'm calling, that's 1 minute. Tonight, I'm calling on VSB elected officials to ask staff to release all of the Beauregard data that they've used for the projection as open data. As academics, it is essential that we, as an academic and as for members of the public, to be able to scrutinize this data. And because the VSB is an academic institution, if you stand by your projection numbers, you should be able to release that data to academics and members of the public who are qualified to do an in-depth analysis and stand by that data. And if you're unable to do so, I highly consider that you go back and look at your numbers. I'm also concerned about concerns regarding equity and community impacts. Members of the community here tonight have spoken at length about that. I have concerns about East Van schools closing and the impacts on parents. I live in Champlain Heights. If you've ever walked up from the River District to Champlain Heights Annex or to the main school, if you do that for a year, you will have calves of steel. Because the hill coming up from Marine is huge. So the impact on parents and on the impacts on the environmental sustainability plan are quite significant, especially in terms of walkability. I'm out of time, so I'll leave it at that. But thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. So I wrote some of your well, I think I got all your questions or discrepancy. However, if you have that in a written form, we can use that as well. But I have what I have here.
I can send it over. I was
perfect.
I have more in-depth speaking notes than what I submitted to the board, but I can send those full remarks over to staff.
Even better. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the in-depth review of the draft long-range facilities plan. I'll open it up for questions, clarification for Aaron. Janet and Jennifer. Janet first.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for coming out once again to the VSB. And I would say that, I appreciate that Alan is asking you to send in the information to our, about the, where you see inconsistencies in data, and I would suggest that if someone brings that to you, then you suggest, ask that whoever's bringing the information to you to send it directly into the VSB, because that's the sort of feedback, that's part of the feedback that I would like to see we get from the community.
Through the chair, absolutely. There have been hundreds of tweets on my Twitter account from parents still going through the data set. I am still going through the data set. I actually spent the better part of Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night manually converting the long-range facility plan appendices and mapping them. So parents are still going through the documents, and I can encourage them to send that through the LRFP. I think that the main concern right now is that that data deserves more scrutiny, but I can't direct them to that email.
you, Erin. Jennifer?
Thank you so much for your presentation through the chair. Thank you, Erin, and for also sharing the concerns that you've been hearing with us tonight. I'm just curious too, I've noticed some of the maps that you've produced and just wondering what some of your goals are with some of those mapping projects and where you see that going.
So I'm a geography student at SFU, currently completing my spatial data analysis certificate and my main degree in global environmental systems. We generally have a philosophy among SFU students that data that is made open and available we use for our projects. We've used City of Vancouver data at length, but the main thing I think for me personally as a researcher and as an academic is to make this data available publicly, that's available for scrutiny, to make my processes available for scrutiny. I've listed how I've made my maps online. And I think it's important for that level of transparency that the public has data that's been presented in a way that's easily accessible. For me, the first map that I produced was actually remapping all of the elementary and secondary school FCIs by catchment area. And then I haven't been able to do annexes yet. That data set's causing me a lot of grief right now, just a lot of grief. But the main goal, I think, is to start that conversation that I think that we need to be having publicly for members of the public to be able to scrutinize that data. And I think through making some of those maps, members of the public have said, you know, whether or not they go to school or they send their kids to a certain school, how I managed to get this number. And a lot of it has just been me going back to the spreadsheet and saying, it's on line X. VSB listed as this, your PDR listed at that, the ministry's listed at this, and then striking a conversation from there. So that's the main goal, as well as I'll note that the initial VSB maps produced for the LRFP doesn't include a scale bar or a legend or a data citation, which is a huge cartographical sin from where I'm from. And it raises some very important, especially scale bar, raises some important questions about distance to certain facilities. So if you're talking about consolidating one and the other, on one map, they may look really close together. On another map, they may be super far apart. And going back to your environmental sustainability plan, if you're looking to promote walkability and active transportation to school, that data is hugely important. And the difference between sending your kids 5 blocks to school and 15 blocks to school is huge. And that's why a scale bar is important. So that's why I'm working on reprojecting some of that data so that parents can make their own conclusions about where their kids might be going.
Hazel? And then Anne.
Hello? Oh, okay. So to reintroduce myself since I came a little bit late today, I am the student trustee. My name is Hazel Pangilinan, and a question more supporting you and kind of towards the board and also the district staff is whether the information published to the public could be a little bit more understandable or simple so that so that students and parents don't have to scrutinize and don't have to convert the data in a way that you know, can take days on end, like Erin was saying. So what I'm really asking is whether information such as the LRPF could be simplified in a way that everybody could understand it. So, you know, the public could have easy access to this information and also be able to see all this information and make a better, well-informed decision or anything like that.
Perfect. Thank you, Hazel. And we started this, just for the people in the audience, we started this discussion last week at the committee with regards to that. And so we do have our communications and our staff, as well as there was volunteered a number of individuals that could assist in that area as well. And so it's good to bring that up again tonight. And then we would look into that. And it's easy because it's easier for, let's say, trustees if we're starting to head out and have that discussion with the broader community or our school liaisons to have something that is easily presentable as well. That would be helpful. But just a reminder that we're still in the draft stages of the long-range facilities plan, and it's best to gather as much information as possible to see what we'll be simplifying. You're suggesting like a 1-page or a 2-page or something very clear for people to understand quickly, right?
Well, no. I understand that this long-range facilities plan is, required to be high level and also, in depth for the sake of fleshing out any little nuances or details. But I can't present any solutions as I don't currently have any. But just to simplify it, like the terminology or some way that if a student or if a parent were to pick it up, they could read it through once and understand it without having to really do too much work with it, because I think the public should be able to read it and understand it clearly so that there's no miscommunication or anything like that, but just easier and easy translation. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. You should be involved in that process as well. So thank you very much. Yeah. Anne.
Thank you. Through the chair, this refers back to what Aaron was talking about with the data discrepancies and also what Janet was saying, asking people to let you know. I can tell you just this afternoon, I was just looking at the websites of General Brock and Van Horn, and under the VSB school plans list, which I believe is on every school's website, I noticed a discrepancy between what was listed as the current enrollment and what the listing of the current enrollment in the LFRP was as well. So I think everybody could probably look at anybody's website and possibly see the discrepancies right there. It didn't say where the other enrollment came from, but it was a VSB document on every school's website as far as I know.
Thank you. And we do encourage any of those discrepancies to be sent in, and oftentimes there's an explanation how you're counting the students, and so we need to gather that, so rather than confusion out there, to send it in and then that can be explained. Thank you. And anyone else? Thank you, Aaron, for the presentation. Next, Geeta Gosal, Secretary of Queen Alex PAC. And I'm not sure I have connected or not. Is it Cindy Chuck? Yes. Okay. Oh, you're presenting together. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me the chance to come here and speak to everybody. My name is Geeta Ghoshal. I am the Secretary of Queen Alexandra PAC. I have a 7-year-old in the school there in grade 1, and I have a 2-year-old waiting to be in that school. The school is located on the corner of Broadway and Clark, so if you take the B line like I will shortly, east, you will cross it, and there's a bus stop right in front of the school, which I quite appreciate. The reason I am here is because I think that the long-range facilities draft plan is inaccessible. I have reasonable comprehension. My abilities with English are reasonable as well. However, I haven't slept for the past few days not because I have my 2-year-old, but because I have been researching this, all of it. And I'm finding that I try not to think about this when I go to bed, but the category of H1, that is attached to a lot of schools that are around my school. That is attached to my school. My kid goes to the basement classroom in that school. a lot of her friends go to the adjacent classrooms in that school. I would like to point out a few of the things that have been keeping me awake. So the VSB and its LRFP plan states that in our area, Queen Alexandra, Grandview Elementary, Queen Victoria Annex and Nightingale are all at least a third empty, while Laura, Secord and Dickens are full. The building at QA is in bad shape with $6 million in deferred maintenance and a high seismic risk. VSB forecasts that QA will decline from the current 168 students today to 109 students by 2027, the sharpest anticipated decline out of all elementary schools in our area. The VSB calculates that it would still have 216 surplus spaces in the area by 2027. Even if QA were closed, it does this analysis for every school listed in the document. Almost every school listed in that document is on the other side of Granville. And I find this highly problematic. This works out to an occupancy rate of approximately 87%. Many of these statistics are highly problematic and lack important context about Queen Alexandra as outlined in the rest of this document. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the calculations that ignore Queen Alexandra's unique programming and space requirements for Indigenous, vulnerable, and special needs populations. The same number used by the VSB in its earlier 2016 facilities plan, which makes no sense because smaller class sizes and stricter class size composition rules were mandated by the courts in 2017. 25% of Queen Alexandra's school population is designated with special needs compared to 9% of the district-wide population. 44% of QA population is Indigenous compared to 5% for the district-wide population. This results in a form of systemic discrimination where schools with larger percentages of special needs students are automatically penalized because they cannot fill classrooms to the same theoretical maximum capacity as schools with fewer special needs students. Cindy, would you like to take that?
Sure. Thank you, Gita. So Chairman and Trustees, thank you very much for giving me a couple moments to speak. My name is Cindy Chuck, and I'm the mother of a first grade student at Queen Alexandra. I only have some preliminary comments and questions, and the reason it's preliminary is because the parents at the school only became aware of the situation over the weekend. And so as we dig deeper into the numbers and as we appeal to the broader constituency of parents, I think that we're going to have a lot more to say. I'm a lawyer and I work more than full-time. My husband's a director at the Cancer Foundation. He works more than full-time, and that's representative of the parents at our school. It's not unusual for a parent at our school to have a full-time job and then have a second job and a third job to make ends meet. This is an incredibly expensive city, even for those of us who are lucky like I am. And not everyone at the school is so fortunate. I'm very, very disappointed at how little effort I perceive was being made to publicize this report. I didn't know about it. Had I not bumped into Gita just because we happened to drop our kids off at the same time, I would not have heard of this. And I consider myself someone that's quite connected and someone that spends a lot of the time at school, is in close contact with my teachers, and someone who cares a lot about my child's education, as I'm sure all the parents here feel the same way. So I'd like to break my submissions into two parts. The first deals with what I think are some of the preliminary issues that arise in the report. And the second part are just some of these very basic questions that the parents on the PAC just don't seem to have a ready answer to based on the materials that we've received. So I'm just going to go first, touch on my colleague Gita's point, which is that the report pegs our occupancy usage at 62% at page 37 of the report. I walk those halls every day. I've walked those halls hundreds of times. What is considered to be an empty classroom based on the report methodology is whether that classroom was originally envisaged to be used as an enrollment class. Our school was built 70 years ago, give or take. The needs in that neighborhood have changed. Let's take a look at what those rooms are being used for. So among the rooms considered empty, we have a sensory room. That's for students who are living with autism. And the funds for that school were raised by the school, by other parents who've realized how important it is to have a room like that available to students. Another room is being used by KidSafe. That's a nonprofit program that provides safe and free of charge out of school care for those parents that can't afford it when school's not in session and who need to work in order to put food on the table. We have rooms being used by our school counselors and a speech pathologist. I don't think I need to explain to you why that's useful. A child that is having trouble coping with mental issues or having trouble communicating, that is going to be a huge impediment to his or her chance to get educated. We have rooms dedicated to music lessons, and they're provided free of charge, again, to many of our families who are struggling. We also have rooms dedicated to Aboriginal education and support work initiatives. Like my colleague Gita said, 44% of our school is of Aboriginal descent. That is a very high percentage. It's one that we are very proud of, and it's one that we want to maintain. My son himself is not Aboriginal, but I think that he benefits a lot from getting to know other Indigenous students, getting to know their history, and understanding what is important in reconciliation. And I don't think that's possible if we live in a segregated society where we have no contact with people who are not exactly like us. And that's one of the things that I love about Queen Alexandra. Now, I have a lot of sympathy for the trustees because I specialize in business restructuring. So as a lawyer, I have to bring plans to court which compromise the interests of many very deserving stakeholders. And I've done this for everything from a small business to national companies that have millions of dollars of debt and assets. They've got thousands of employees. They've got dozens or maybe even hundreds of locations across Canada. Really hard decisions have to be made. Sometimes those decisions affect real people, real families. Can they put food on the table? They affect the environment. I know these decisions are not easy at all, but I'm asking you to consider when you look at this and you ask yourself whether a classroom is full. We say the rooms in our school are full in the best meaning of the word. They're full of support for the students in our community and some of the most vulnerable families in our community. So unfortunately, I've run out of time to really get to the questions I was hoping to get to, but I hope that we'll have a chance to address you again, and I hope that in the meantime, we've given you a taste of what we think makes our school so important in the community. And moving the students is not going to change what they need, which they are getting right now through the generosity of the teachers. Thank you.
Cindy, you're the last delegation. Is it 3 more minutes? You can ask the questions.
Well, I do talk for a living, so that's pretty exciting. Yeah. So we had a meeting over the weekend where the first parents to hear about this got together, and we were still unclear of whether our school is at risk of being closed. We can't seem to get a straight answer. Some of the parents we talked to who had been through this before told us that when they had made inquiries, they were told, oh, no, this is just a report. It's not a closure list. But lo and behold, they found themselves on a closure list. You know, the parents at the school were incredibly busy. We care about the school, but if we're not on a closure list, that's obviously going to affect, how we're going to conduct ourselves. And we still don't understand what is in store for our community and whether we need to be aware of the risk. And if the school is going to be closed, I think that we're lacking information on some very basic questions. Where do our children go? What about those families that can't afford cars? There's many of those. Who is going to provide the social services and the student support our school currently provides? In the mornings, I see entire families eating breakfast at our breakfast program. We have subsidized lunches for those who can't afford it. You pay $0 if you can't afford it. We have an on-campus grocery store, which if you can't afford it, you don't pay. We have winter coats. If you can't afford it, you don't pay. I don't understand where that need is going to be satisfied if our school is closed. And lastly, the question I had was what message the school board wants to send. If they decide to close the school, that is an action, a very intentional action. And I want to ask what that really means when you're closing a school with a population where almost 1 in 2 students are Indigenous, and 1 in 4 have special needs, and 1 in 3 speak English as a second language. I think our school population, it has a lot in common with Strathcona, and you've heard from Strathcona, and we share many of those same concerns. Our school is a place where families can come grow, get strong, and be connected with their community. And I just don't see how that's going to happen without the benefit of the amazing teachers that we have at this school who work overtime all the time. I couldn't be happier with our school. I know Geeta feels exactly the same way.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to open up for committee members if anyone has any questions. Okay. I'm going to summarize the evening. Yeah, Janet?
I think the question was raised about not understanding if the school is on a closure list or not. And I know we're not meant to ask staff questions, but I think that's a fairly fundamental question. I think maybe that could be addressed this evening.
I was just going to, rather than ask staff, and we can ask staff, or you can ask staff after I do the summation. A quick summation of the evening, and not going to respond directly to your question because we're not really having a dialogue, but a number of your questions I won't answer, but because we're in a staged approach for the whole process. And at this stage, and all the districts they have a long-range facilities plan. And the last one we had, the first one we had was in 2016. And every year there's supposed to be a review of the long-range facilities plan. So this is a natural progression. This year is the first one since 2016, and it's a little more in-depth. And there's a number of reasons for that. There was a board, there was a one-year by-election board, there was a special advisor, there was a appointed trustee. So this is the first time that there is a board that's in for four years. And with the beginning of that, the long-range facilities plan needed to be updated. With that, in that long-range facilities plan, there are 17 recommendations. And I'd like to be clear that it's a draft long-range facility plan. So it's out there, and there's going to be revisions to it, I'm thinking. There's a lot of discussion, but to be very clear, it's a draft long-range facilities plan for discussion. And this is what this is, discussion, ongoing discussion. In that long-range facilities plan, there are 17 recommendations. And when we go through that at the end, be it April, be it whenever, but it would be sometime this year, in my view, this school year. In the long-range facility, with the 17 recommendations, one of the recommendations is asking, and if it passes, we don't know at this stage, we want input, is to ask staff what they think, if there should be a school closure list. If there is a list, there's nothing about numbers, there's nothing like that. And there's other recommendations, and it's in the long-range facilities plan. So there are a number of things we're discussing and looking at. I think what happened with regards to specific schools, the number of 28 schools, someone did a calculations of all the schools that were being looked at, or they weren't even looked at. Staff presented a report to give an idea, a general idea of we have capacity in the district. And we were looking at certain areas, or staff was looking at certain areas, and in that zone, a number of schools that are connected closely together. If one of the schools were consolidated, is there capacity amongst all those in that area? And it's it's not stating that those are the schools. It's just examples throughout the district that do we have capacity. That's just, those are examples. The names, there was thought of, you know, do you include those names or you just highlight them? It's just to get the idea, first step of the long-range facilities plan. Do we have space? Do we have space, too much space in the district? And so that's the first step. So with regards to your question of, is there a list of schools on a closure list? There is not. There's just a recommendation for that long-range facilities plan to move forward, how we view the district, and we need to view the district 10 years from now, and we make some of our decisions based on that. And this is a requirement of the provincial government as well. So as stated when this was presented out, there is not a closure list. We're just looking at a long-range facilities plan, and I think that's where some of the confusion is. Sorry, it's not a discussion. We can talk later about this. But for Janet, is that clear enough, or do we need staff? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I'd just like to thank, and does any committee members have any follow-up questions or comments? Oh, Deputy Superintendent.
Sorry, Chair, just
yes.
thank you. I just did want to provide one piece of further clarification. I think there's a lot of confusion in the community about the difference between a long-range facilities plan and a closure report. And so it's really important to note that, as you've indicated, this report is a long-term roadmap and a planning document. It's absolutely not a closure list. It's a high-level analysis, as you've pointed out. If there were to be any schools proposed for potential closure, there would be a lot of data that would be provided and a lot more information provided. And so individuals who are aware of the process in 2016 will know there was a 2016 long-range facilities plan, and then there was a very extensive list with a lot of analysis and a lot of data and the kinds of things that we've been hearing people are wanting to see in the long-range plan that really would be in a closure report. So I just wanted to clarify those two things.
Thank you. So just to summarize, and there was a number of areas of discussions from the delegations, and it's difficult to summarize because we started with a discussion with regards to French immersion, the French immersion program proposal from Henry Hudson to Strathcona, and there's a whole set of items brought forward there, and I won't try to summarize that as the discussion is ongoing. And tomorrow at Strathcona there is an information session, just like there was an information session yesterday at Hudson Elementary, and a report will be coming back to the board, to this committee, most likely next month in April. With regards to the long-range facilities plan, there was a lot of discussion, and it was varied. I think some areas that there were similarities. There was a lot of talk about vulnerable students, diverse population, right sizing of schools, and the thoughts of that. And I think, you know, a lot of these things will be discussed further. Not selling of properties, thoughts of consultants with regards to facilities and how we move forward with that. So there are 17 recommendations in there, and the trustees will be looking at those. I mean, there could be additions, there could be review amendments for those 17 recommendations. But as stated by the Deputy Superintendent, that the long-range facilities plan discussion and the presentation here this evening, and a lot of people wanted to get some information or present as delegations early, and we don't want to, you know, prevent or hold that up. So we want to hear as much as possible for us to make a decision. But with regards to school closure, there's not a school closure list in that long-range facilities plan. Okay, and in particular with regards to all the long-range facilities plan delegations, this week, and like we said, we want to hear it, and the time that you wanted to present it, we're willing and want to learn as early as possible. So thank you for all the delegations. I'd like to particularly thank the committee members that have been, I've never seen a standing committee meet week after week after week. I think this is an important area, and there's a lot to be learned, and we're hearing a lot from the community, and we're hearing a lot from the school community and internally and externally. So we appreciate all committee members, and there's more to come, and I thank you for being part of this committee. And I thank staff, although I tried to hold staff off this evening from being part of the fuller discussion, because there are other meetings ongoing. So there are dates that the board wants to hear directly from members of the community. So from there, thank you, staff. So from there, thank you, everyone, and I will see committee members next week. Thank you.